Chapter 1165. Wearing a pair of black-rimmed glasses, little Spider looked like a freshman who had just graduated from university. His youthful temperament made his identity as a talented research assistant especially convincing. He put on his long-awaited formal attire and looked a little sluggish, like a bookworm. It could be considered his true colors. "I've worn red and blue tights, so much that I can't get used to formal attire." The little Spider thought to herself, "Am I turning into a pervert who loves to wear tight clothes?" Lucius Fox was a thin, middle-aged black man who looked very spirited. He was the CEO of Wayne Enterprises and one of the few people who knew Bruce Wayne's other identity. He provided technological support to Bruce, and many of Batman's equipment were developed by him. But in general, he was more inclined toward high-precision machinery, which did not match the biotechnology that the Lex Group was good at. He was also a little curious about Peter's identity, but Bruce would not explain too much to him. Although he and Alfred were the two people that Bruce trusted the most, Bruce was a skeptic. He believed that there were no eternal secrets and no one who could keep secrets forever. Everyone had a weakness, including himself. The best way to protect them was not to let them know too much. Therefore, Lucius only knew that Bat needed little Spider to infiltrate the Lex Group's secret laboratory, but he did not know much about little Spider's mission and identity. "Don't talk too much. You're playing the image of a man of few words," Lucius said. "The more you interact with them, the easier it is to reveal flaws. Your right ear has been implanted with a bone conduction headset. If you encounter any technical or scientific problems, I will guide you remotely. Don't move around in the laboratory. Any small movement will expose your true level. It's hard to fake academics." Taciturn, little Spider thought to himself, "I think you're making things difficult for me. Maybe I should play the role of a man of few words, but with a lot of inner drama." Lucius sighed. "For a man of few words, the expressions on your face are too rich." When they passed by a laboratory, the little Spider took a few more glances at it. He clearly wanted to say something, but he was worried about his image, so he suppressed his talkative nature. When they arrived at the office provided by Lex Corporation, the Spider's senses did not detect any eavesdropping devices. The little Spider finally could not hold it in any longer. "Are they doing non-destructive cell replication?" Peter continued, "I just saw that they seem to be using somatic cells to induce and cultivate stem cells in a targeted manner, trying to restore the function of cells. But it seems that they are still at the first step, transforming ordinary human skin cells into a new type of universal cells with the function of embryonic stem cells." Lucius felt a little lost. He specialized in electronics and machinery, and biology seemed to be a little broad. Was he good at general knowledge and general research? Faced with such front-end problems, he could only show a confused and innocent look. "Looks like your world's biological research is not very developed," the little Spider said excitedly. "The method they used cannot cultivate universal cells suitable for the human body because they used a reverse transcriptase virus in the process of genetic recombination." He excitedly explained to Dr. Lucius, "Reverse transcriptase is a tool used by viruses to modify DNA. It is a naturally evolved DNA compiler. Viruses use reverse transcriptase to transcribe their own RNA into DNA, and then use the organelles of the host cell to carry out transcription, translation, and synthesis of daughter viruses, just like how Lao Wang parasitizes the reproductive system of the neighbor and uses the reproductive system of the neighbor to give birth to his own child." "I know what a retrovirus is." Hearing the dirty metaphor of the little Spider, Lucius could not help but interrupt him. "Oh." The little Spider did not know that his inadvertent display of academic discrimination had provoked Dr. Lucius. He continued to explain, "The retrovirus is a tool for genetic recombination. If the method of using the virus as a tool is not appropriate, it will cause genetic pollution, which is to cause genetic mutation, lose the expression of the original cell, and be unable to retain the gene expression of the original cell. Take cloning as an example. Using cells with recombinant DNA by the retrovirus for cloning, there is a high probability of cloning a huge tumor. If the tumor can still maintain its human identity, it will look like an egg with teeth, like being bitten by a Shar-Pei that has been exposed to radiation, also like an avocado and another older and more disgusting avocado having sex with a crocodile, giving birth to a disfigured child. Lucius could not help but imagine the little spider's malicious metaphor and was immediately disgusted. He angrily interrupted the little spiders think of an even more disgusting description competition and roared, "I know what genetic mutation caused by gene recombination by retrovirus is, and I also know what genetic mutation is. I graduated from MIT with a professional doctorate, not from a state university, nor am I an idiot from a community college. You don't have to explain these questions to me." The little spider was stunned. "But I graduated from a state university, Empire State University. After the New York State University system was destroyed by the apocalypse, it was rebuilt as a research-oriented university. At that time, I was still in high school and wanted to go to Harvard University because it was the strongest school in the field of biology. But later, I heard from SHIELD that after the New York State University system was destroyed, the U.S. government intended to use its educational resources to rebuild a research-oriented university to study Skynet technology closely. There was also a friendly alien leader professor from the Starling race who cooperated to run the school. Compared to MIT, Harvard was like 3 centuries behind. Then I changed my goal of enrolling. Of course, I'm not saying that MIT is not good. It used to train Dr. Stark. I mean, times have changed. Faced with the challenge of the technological boom, it is now a little behind the times. After all, it cannot compare to Empire State University. I mean, it is not suitable to compare with Empire State University because we are the closest to Skynet and we also cooperate with Starlings. We have already surpassed the limits of Earth. Of course, on Earth. I mean, in the countries on Earth. MIT is a good university." Lucius was so ashamed and angry that he almost fainted. The little spider knew that he had said the wrong thing and kept explaining, "MIT is a good university." "Shut up." To avoid being humiliated by the little spider, Dr. Lucius could only change the topic. "What's wrong with the Lex Corporation's research?" The little spider returned to his familiar field, and he vaguely sensed that the level of research in this world was a little behind. He became a little excited and talked about his favorite field of biology. Looking at the information they released, they are challenging somatic cell cloning. They are not cloning with somatic cell nuclei or egg cells, but completely cloning with somatic cells. Now, all-purpose cells are just the first step. They want to use the somatic cells in their hands to create cells that are more versatile than stem cells. They have to overcome countless difficulties. Now, their biggest headache is the genetic damage caused by retrovirus recombinant DNA. With the direction of their research, there is no hope of solving this problem within 5 years. They are going the wrong way. The little spider suddenly realized something. They are trying to clone a group of special cells, and there are many problems. I can't get the data of that cell, but I can see that the characteristics of that cell are very unique. In some areas, such as vitality and genetic mutation, it is beneficial to research. This kind of cell has a strong vitality and will not easily die from experiments or damage. That is to say, it is very durable and especially suitable for experiments. But at the same time, when the retrovirus invades this cell, it will be easily destroyed. They have to use the symbiotic virus to cultivate it. Therefore, this kind of retrovirus is very destructive to genes. To use an analogy, replicating this kind of cell is like studying an Iron Man with iron bones. Ordinary scalpels can't cut the skin at all. Then someone developed a powerful artillery, that kind of retrovirus. They hope to use artillery to smash the Iron Man into pieces, and then grope around in the pieces to put together a complete human form. This is just the first step. The ultimate goal is to resurrect the Iron Man into 2. You have a way to solve the problem." Dr. Lucius heard the hidden meaning in the little spider's words. The little spider smiled confidently. "I dare not say anything else, but retrovirus, that is my specialty. I once worked with Dr. Cotter to develop a method to transcribe lizard DNA into human DNA for expression. I also helped Harry cure his family's genetic disease, that is a retrovirus. Even his superpower was the result of his father using a retrovirus as a tool to modify his DNA. The spider's venom was a type of retrovirus that modified genes. Of course, the little spider did not say this out loud. Transcribing animal DNA for positive expression in the human body. If I use the analogy just now, it is like cutting a person into 8 pieces and putting them together with the animal's body parts. In the end, not only is the person still alive, but he also has the ability of an animal. The difficulty is definitely not low. So, the problem that they have a headache is a piece of cake for me. The little spider said confidently, they just haven't found the scalpel to dissect the Iron Man, and they haven't found the enzyme to manipulate the cell DNA. I can even predict that the tool is in the retrovirus they are cultivating. They just need to transform the artillery into a laser cutting knife. In the office, Luther was having a headache. The progress of the cloning of Superman in the laboratory was extremely slow. If not for the strong vitality of Superman's cells, they would have used up the blood and epidermal cells that Luther had painstakingly collected, and the laboratory would have been closed. There were many problems in cloning Superman. The simplest one required at least enough experimental materials, and that was to replicate Superman's somatic cells without damage. Only with enough Superman cells could they talk about the next step. Cultivating non-destructive cells was not as simple as dividing the cells. Even if Superman's cells were resistant to genetic mutation, in the absence of a human body, the repeated division of somatic cells would cause fatal genetic damage. Luther wanted to clone Superman, not the descendants of Superman's genetic mutation. To obtain Superman's non-destructive cells, the first thing to do was to restore the function of Superman's cells, that is, totipotent cells, and then to induce stem cells. The method of obtaining differentiated cells through stem cells would cause minimal genetic damage. But now, to obtain Superman stem cells, the first thing to do was to use the retrovirus to restructure the genes. The genetic damage in the process had reached a level of destruction. Without the need for multiple divisions, the cultured cells could not be used. Thinking of the difficulty of the experiment, which could be said to be a process with no progress, Luther had the urge to capture Superman and extract a tube of his spinal cord. It would be best if Superman was a woman. Then he could capture her, extract her eggs, and then extract the mammary gland cell nucleus for cloning. If he could capture Superman, what the hell was there to clone? Superman's somatic cells were all stolen when the alien general came to Earth and fought with Superman, okay? Chapter 1166. Hey, Bat. Lucius contacted Bruce through a secret communication device. He hid in the bathroom, placed the computer on the toilet, and faced the masked Bruce Wayne. Of course, he was now Batman. Lucius found a way to use a signal that would not be detected. He was wearing pajamas, his hair was messy, and he only contacted Bat when he woke up in the morning. "The boy you sent is very unusual." Lucius snitched. "I've also made progress on the matter you asked me to investigate. There are many illegal projects in the Lex Corporation's secret laboratory. Although they hide some documents and avoid some research from us, the scientific research is consistent, so I can still see something. Although Luther is carrying out many projects at the same time, there is only one core project in the entire secret laboratory, complete somatic cell cloning. And it's specific cloning. They're replicating a special existence. Of course, their progress is very slow. From what I can see, they're still stuck at the all-purpose cell step. For complete somatic cell cloning, they must first restore the cell's totipotency and return ordinary cells to the state of undifferentiated stem cells. This is also related to the technology of non-destructive replication of specific somatic cells. This is also the reason why I found out that their cloning targets are very specific. Generally speaking, when researching somatic cell cloning, they would choose a universal sample. However, I noticed that their samples are very scarce, and this has greatly delayed their research progress. Lucius, Batman, on the other side of the screen spoke. Are you sure this is the biggest secret of the Lex Corporation's laboratory? My judgment is not reliable. Batman, you and Luthor are both people with more thoughts than me. It's too easy for you to hide from me. If Luthor has a secret, I can't guarantee that I'll find it. I can only say that in my professional judgment, this is the biggest project of the Lex Corporation's laboratory. Lucius replied. Batman, on the other side, was silent. He thought about countless things in an instant. Is Origins real or fake? Is the Prophet and Spider lying to me? Is this project related to Origins? What is Origins? How is it related to the mysterious First Prophet? Is it the First Prophet's weakness? In an instant, Bat reconsidered these questions from countless angles. He said in a hoarse voice, Lucius, I need you to have a deeper understanding of this project. It's best if you can figure out the source of the sample cells. An indescribable awkwardness appeared on Lucius's face. He hesitated. Batty, you know that my strengths are in precision machinery and electronics, and biology is not my forte. Interfering with someone else's project in a direction that I'm not good at, this will cause my reputation to plummet, and I'll be ostracized by the researchers at Lex Corporation. If you need me to, of course, I can be a little more difficult to deal with. I can use the excuse of funding review to interfere with them. Before Luthor responds, I can seize the opportunity to get something out of the project. But Batty, this isn't the best move. Didn't you already send a professional over? Professional? Bruce was stunned for a moment. Then his mind began to recall, quickly. He quickly reacted. You mean Peter? You've been in contact with him for some time. What kind of young man do you think he is? Batty did not answer the question directly. He always avoided revealing information. If information was compared to wealth, Batman was a grandette through and through. If he used this attitude to run the Wayne family business, he would have acquired the entire Gotham a long time ago. Lucius smiled bitterly. Old friend, you've really made me look bad. Now, in the Lex Corporation's laboratory, I'm just a dispensable character sent by Wayne Enterprises, and he's almost become the god here. His understanding of this place far exceeds mine. He has already entered the core of this project. In the core laboratory of the Lex Corporation, using retroviruses to implant gene fragments, activating the differentiation function of cells, and obtaining totipotent cells with the characteristics of stem cells. Yes, your train of thought is correct. But you're hoping to use the same thinking to obtain stem cells, cells that can develop into complete individual potential of various tissues and organs. In other words, totipotent stem cells, although it's only a difference of one word, these are two completely different concepts. Totipotent stem cells only exist until the 32nd cell stage of cleavage in a fertilized egg. This is also the ethical limit of studying totipotent stem cells. Every time you obtain a totipotent stem cell, you have to kill an embryo. You're hoping to implant gene fragments in somatic cells and differentiate them into embryonic stem cells. What kind of concept is that? If you succeed, then there will be no limit to the lifespan of humans, and everyone will be immortal. Because by using the same technology, we can restore one cell in our body to the state of an embryonic stem cell. It will be able to differentiate into a brand new me. As long as we complete the induced differentiation technology, our body cells will have no physiological limits. This is the technology of immortality. I'm not saying it's impossible. I've seen many more sensational and incredible technologies, but this is not something you can research. The little spider stood on the podium and scolded the researchers who were taking notes. You don't even have the confidence to insert a gene fragment and induce it to differentiate into a totipotent cell. using retroviruses to cause irreversible genetic damage to totipotent cells. If you succeeded on Earth, then you would still be wandering in the Sirius galaxy. The reason why I extracted the gene compiler, reverse transcriptase, from the retrovirus and created this brand new gene editing tool so that you can restore part of the totipotency of cells without loss and extract totipotent cells without loss is because I need to succeed in convincing you. It's only because I need a successful way to convince you, not because I have any expectations for this path. If I had, I would send this paper to Science and boast about the potential of this technology, including the potential of cultivating step by step from single stem cells to pluripotent stem cells, to totipotent stem cells, that is, embryonic stem cells, and the possibility of human immortality. Do you believe it? At that time, those who are willing to provide me with research funding can line up from the metropolis to Gotham. The ultimate goal of this project is to reclone some cell samples and ensure the genetic integrity of the cells. What kind of concept is this? Even if it's like in science fiction movies where we want to clone dinosaurs, it's more realistic than this, because we can reconstruct the genes of dinosaurs, and by inserting gene fragments, we can induce the evolution of dinosaurs step by step. I personally prefer large birds, such as ostriches, to induce them to revert to their ancestors. Because no one asked us to replicate a specific dinosaur with the same genes as countless years ago. But the owner of this laboratory doesn't even allow us to use orangutans, Whisper, or some large upright apes, Whisper. You know what I mean? To use their fertilized eggs to reconstruct the genes of the sample step by step. We all know that although the genes of the sample look quite human, it is so different that it even makes people wonder if it is a creature from Earth. The scientists below whispered to each other, and nodded frequently. Everyone, we are like lame dancers in shackles challenging the world's dance king. It's impossible to begin with, and they actually don't allow us to try. The little spider spread his hands and sighed. Suddenly, he calmly raised a finger. So now I have some crazy ideas and I need your support. What are you doing? What are you doing? Peter. A few hours ago, the little spider looked at himself in the mirror and said in a somewhat obsessed manner, "Give up this crazy idea. This is simply evil. But the truth is right in front of me. This is the charm of science." The little spider in the mirror said to himself, "There's no good or evil in science. It only has truth and falsehood. But there are good and evil scientists. We still have a conscience." The little spider touched his chest and struggled. Chapter 1167. Luther leaned against the back of the chair and looked at the man who had broken through the layers of defense of the Lex Corporation and appeared before him. He appeared rather uneasy. The tie on his purple suit was wrinkled by himself, and he was sweating profusely. He fidgeted before Luther and looked very nervous. However, Luther had never underestimated the man before him. Even though he was a genius, and he might be a bit paranoid, he hated madmen who were completely chaotic. Madmen were the bane of geniuses. Since when were you willing to leave Gotham? Luther laughed coldly. Leaving your dark nest and coming to the light? No, no. The light is not suitable for you. You should hide in the dark forever. Clown. The clown stammered, "Luther, I heard you're working with Wayne now." Luther laughed with disdain. "Since when did you care about the uncrowned king of Gotham? Shouldn't you continue playing games with that bat?" "Bruce is Bat." Clown laughed. "Why did he come to find you? I am very interested. As far as I know, Batman is investigating something very interesting. He revealed a secret, that is, our world is under the control of a mysterious organization. 3 clowns called prophets trying to build a boring world. They think the world will develop according to their wishes, just like a boring story. You know, our wish is for the world to be more exciting and full of surprises." Luther's expression changed slightly. He planned calmly in his mind. "Does Clown know that I am a member of the committee?" Luther started to analyze Clown. Clown appeared before him and mentioned the existence of the committee. This meant that he had started to come into contact with the committee's secrets. However, to prevent people like Clown from causing trouble, the committee avoided Gotham, which was the most troublesome. If Bruce was Bat, he should have guessed it. However, his attention was too focused on Superman that he overlooked such an obvious clue. If Bruce was Bat, why did he come to discuss the partnership? The third prophet had betrayed them. The third prophet was in Gotham. She wanted to understand the secret behind the world's destruction, and she was one of the committee members. Of course, Luthor knew the secret behind the world's destruction, but he could not remember it. To prevent others from stealing their memories, the committee members all gave themselves hints. Only when they reached the headquarters and sat on the committee seat would they become a committee member of that World Security Council. Even Luthor himself was surprised as to why he wanted to maintain such an organization, but he was sure that these were his true thoughts. There was no way the third prophet did not know that his memory was sealed. If it was the second prophet, that dangerous guy, he could pry open their brains, but the third prophet could not. So, they came for the origin. There's a little mouse that sneaked into your company. What secret does it want to know? The clown's painted face moved closer to Luthor, and the pungent smell of inferior paint filled his nostrils. Luthor frowned. This has nothing to do with you, Clown. This isn't you, loser. The clown purposely called Luthor by the wrong name. He said provocatively, "You used to be a pitiful character among the masses. You were a well-dressed, righteous person, so disgusting. It was the arrival of Superman that changed you, turning you into a freak like me. He inspired your ambition, and you were jealous of him." The clown laughed madly. He pointed at Luthor and said, "Superman turned you from a boring person into a jealous madman. I understand this kind of thing, meeting a person. He can make your life meaningful. He can help you get rid of those mediocre lives. He can make you whole. That is my nemesis. Madness is like gravity. All I need is a gentle push. Superman is that gentle push." Luthor revealed a sarcastic smile. "You really are a complete madman. You want to know everything. Fine, I will tell you everything. I remember the second prophet's evaluation of you. When he was judging who in this world could pose a threat to the survival of the world, someone mentioned you. He said that the clown is a complete madman. His nature is chaos, and he will probably destroy the world. The second prophet only replied that the clown does not have the ability to destroy the world. He is just a clown. Chaos exists outside of order, extreme chaos. The clown is just a clumsy imitation of chaos. He is just a human imitating chaos. What is so scary about madness and chaos? I have seen many of them. The clown is in chaos, but he does not have chaos itself. Because if he did, he would become chaos itself. He looks crazy and seems to want to hurt everything, but he only uses fear to control people. Just like someone said, what we are truly afraid of is fear itself. He can find your weaknesses and defeat you one by one, but so what? Batman can also find your weaknesses. The only reason the clown is stronger than Batman is because he has no principles. Believe me, my bottom line is much lower than him. Because the clown's actions have their own internal logic, and I don't. Madness is also a kind of internal logic, but the things that the prophet does can surpass all logic. A strange smile appeared on the clown's face, and a gun was pressed against the back of his head. Someone behind him said, "The second prophet asked me to say hello to you on his behalf." Luthor sighed with emotion. "Can your madness suddenly make a super scion from planet Namek appear in the void in front of us?" The clown smiled slightly. "Do you think death can frighten me?" "Death can turn you into nothing." The person behind him suddenly put down the gun and sat down next to him. "Time was tight on my way here. Can you give me some barbecue?" The man had a bearded Mongolian face, and his expression was very calm. "My name is Khan. Death can't bring anything. What causes fear is always fear itself. Death is a zero. It can make everything meaningless. Clown, I know you. You can always use various reasons to make people not kill you. Most of them are **T reasons like, if you kill me, you will become me. It sounds like a mimetic virus, but in fact, the death of any person has no meaning. People are afraid because the things that death changes only exist in their minds. Khan said calmly, "Why doesn't the second prophet care about you? You may not know what planet Namek scions are, and I don't know either." This example is used to illustrate a concept. The probability of this happening is 2 to the power of 190 million. If Kakarot suddenly appears in front of you and beats you up, you can call it an infinite non-probability event. The second prophet's ability is to wait for everything to happen, including infinite non-probability events. The clown sitting on the chair suddenly disappeared. The clown who came to chat with Luther suddenly disappeared. It is also an infinite non-probability event, incomprehensible, unrelated to any law of causality, an accidental event, or a miracle. Khan said calmly, "The third prophet greatly underestimated the second prophet's power. The second prophet can make her disappear with just a thought. He can create miracles. So, Luther, this is the reason why you are afraid of him. You can understand chaos, but you can't understand miracles or infinite non-probability events." Luther smiled and said, "Yes, clowns are difficult to deal with, but I have to admit that the prophet is the most incomprehensible thing I have ever seen. The second prophet can make anything impossible happen, but the first prophet is truly omniscient and omnipotent. The second prophet said that the first prophet is the collection of all known and unknown, and only he can make the second prophet's infinite non-probability events ineffective. But the first prophet has a fatal weakness, stemming from his great feat of saving the world last time." Luther said, "So the third prophet found me and wanted to know the secret of saving the world last time for me. She can't know the secret." Khan said, "This is the biggest reason for the existence of the organization. We will keep this secret together because once the secret is leaked, the end of the world will come again. Because God is dead." Luther looked up and said. Khan also nodded and said, "Yes, God is dead." After Khan left, Luther looked at the void in front of him deeply. He did not speak, but he sighed deeply in his heart. Why am I so loyal to the organization? Luther shouldn't have something like loyalty, but the organization has something like the three-prophet system. This is where the balance of the world lies. If we lose a prophet, the entire world will fall into the most complete despair. Just like that monster, the second prophet. Without the first prophet, the world will be his plaything. So, I must save the first prophet. I, Luther, have decided to become a hero in order to save the world. Headquarters of the World Security Council. Chun-Ong looked down at the headquarters with his hands behind his back. The crowd was bustling like ants. He had just created an infinite non-probability event, causing the particles that made up the clown to suddenly move in different directions and disintegrate his existence. Everyone knew that the movement of molecules was chaotic and disorderly. If there was a moment when all the molecules in a lake suddenly moved in different directions, then the lake would explode. The possibility of this was extremely small, but it existed. Therefore, the atoms and molecules that made up the clown would suddenly undergo an infinite, almost impossible movement. It suddenly appeared. This was an infinite non-probability event. Such a future was decided by Chun-Ong, and it was destined that the clown would suddenly explode. The second prophet Chen-Ang's true ability was to make any probability of a miracle happen. Among them, the most incredible beyond normal probability was called an infinite non-probability event. The third prophet only knew that Chun-Ong could choose and even decide the occurrence of a certain event, but she did not know to what extent his ability could reach. But even so, the second prophet was still not invincible, because the first prophet's known ability was omnipotence. He could do anything known to humans, including stopping the second prophet from deciding the future. The third prophet could predict the future, the second prophet decided the future, and the first prophet created the future. Luther sat in the office and thought, why do these three with such a huge difference in ability have the same rights? Compared to the terrifying second prophet and first prophet, the third prophet is a completely harmless little girl. Why? Why do the two prophets give the third prophet the same rights? The third prophet cannot restrain the two prophets at all. Her existence is not what we call mutual checks and balances. The future that the third prophet sees is completely included in the perception of the other two prophets. Why would the first prophet say, there is no essential difference between all the prophets' abilities, but the understanding is different? The little spider trembled with fear as he carried out an experiment that in his eyes touched upon human ethics and bordered on evil. He wanted to use a retrovirus to insert the target's gene fragment into a genetically similar zygote sample. Using the same technology that his father modified for him, he wanted to create a retrovirus based on the sample's gene. But it was different from the stimulation source that the little spider felt to activate the inserted gene fragment, the genetically modified spider. The sample's vitality was very strong and very stubborn. Wanting to modify and recombine the gene not only cost the little spider a lot of energy, but the little spider also accidentally discovered that the sample cell had a special reaction to sunlight. Under sunlight, it was countless times stronger. Therefore, the little spider had to strip off part of the sample's gene. Using the difference between the sample's state of being exposed to sunlight and that of being isolated from sunlight, the little spider grafted the sample's gene, which was close to human genes, into a human zygote. Then, the corresponding stimulation source was launched into the sun. In this way, in a sense, the human who had cloned the sample's gene would activate the hidden gene after being exposed to sunlight. This kind of technology was actually a copy of the little spider's own superpower technology. It was not a complete clone at all. Instead, it was the creation of a human with the sample's gene expression. In other words, the little spider's own superpower receptor, the spider, was replaced with the sample, which was Superman. This was actually a half-clone. Even so, the little spider, who felt that he had violated scientific ethics, still felt deeply guilty. Compared to his father, Richard Parker, who used his own child as an experiment, and compared to his scientific mentor, Chenong, who was crazy, Peter Parker, who began to struggle over such a small matter, was simply the Virgin Mary among scientists. He did not deserve to be the villain of an evil scientist. Chapter 1168. The experiment had reached a critical moment. Little Spider hurriedly put on his white coat and went to the laboratory. The experiment sample embryo had been modified, but to activate and awaken it required an extremely powerful energy source. Little Spider could only use the sun as the energy source. This way, the cloned product would need to be exposed to solar radiation for 18 years to awaken the gene in its body. Mobile phonum. Vought W. Calm Little Spider had already decided that this period of time would be perfect for the embryo to develop and grow. The embryo with the sample gene would grow like a normal person. When it reached adulthood, it would activate the gene fragment inserted by the retrovirus and gain the ability of the sample. This period of time would be perfect for the personality development of the test subject. Although in a moment of impulse, the little spider created this experimental subject that violated human ethics. As its creator, he still hoped that the embryo could grow like a normal human, obtain the chance to perfect its personality, and become an independent individual instead of an experimental subject. When he arrived at the laboratory, he saw a young man with a shaved head staring at the developing embryo in the artificial womb. The little spider came to a sudden realization. This was probably the controller of the Lex Corporation, Lex Luthor. A few researchers accompanied him. He looked at the embryo in the artificial womb in a daze. How's the development of the anomaly? Luthor looked at the embryo with a hint of disgust. The project to clone Superman was named Bizarro, which meant weird monster. In Luthor's eyes, Superman was such a weird thing, an alien monster, a god that should not exist in the world. Therefore, this Superman, who was half cloned by the little spider, was also named Bizarro. Hey! Little Spider heard the name and came up to him with dissatisfaction. What did you call him? He's our child. Dr. Peter. Luther finally noticed him. He turned around and smiled. Dr. Peter, Lex Corporation thanks you for your contribution to the project. You're a visiting scholar of Wayne Corporation, right? I'm sorry to let you see the incompetent side of Lex Corporation. There are too many useless people here. Luther glanced around the laboratory, causing the researchers inside to lower their heads in guilt. Thank you for your support for our project. Luther emphasized the words, our project. What happens next is none of your business. Bizarro will be taken over by a new group of laboratories because the following topics have nothing to do with biology or cloning. I've read your experiment report. This monster needs a lot of light radiation to grow, right? I will set up a radiation research team to specifically cultivate it. At the same time, someone else will be responsible for controlling it. When the little spider heard Luther's cold and heartless reply, it felt like its scalp was going to explode. He's a human, not a test subject. The little spider retorted loudly, we created him, but we have no right to deprive him of his human rights. This is the ethics of cloning. A clone is still a human. What's more, he is only a half-clone. He is a test tube baby. The doctor who created the test tube baby has no right to control his body. Because of my natural rights, the little spider said fearlessly, staring into Luther's eyes. Dr. Peter, Luther said unhurriedly, although you created him, he is the property of Lex Corporation. So, I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to calm down outside. Luther gestured for his subordinates to chase Peter out. He turned to the blue-shirt, skinny and tall researcher beside him and said, Dr. Reed, no one can compare to you in the study of high-energy radiation from cosmic storms. According to the original experimental plan, the test subject needs to be stimulated by light radiation during the normal growth process. Can you use higher energy radiation to speed up this process? The end product created by cloning is a normal embryo. This does not meet the requirements of our biological engineering, so we need to conduct modulation to speed up its growth. They are a commodity, an industrial product. I want them to be in the state of a finished product when they come off the production line. I don't need to wait for them to grow like breeding. Peter looked back at Luther as he resisted the security guards. When he saw the person Luther was questioning, his eyes suddenly lit up and he shouted, Dr. Reed! Mr. Fantastic! When he saw that Reed only looked up at him in surprise, there was no sign that he knew him. The little spider cursed under his breath. Damn parallel, world counterpart! Does he know me? Reed asked, puzzled. A light flashed in Luther's eyes. He glanced at Peter and smiled. He is the person in charge of this project. We are communicating with the Wayne Group's scientist. He is a guy who has been brainwashed by scientific ethics and doesn't understand the meaning of what we are doing now. Dr. Reed, you are famous in the group. It is normal for him to have heard of you. But I heard him say something about Mr. Fantastic. Reed scratched his head and said, I think I have heard this name before. Luther changed the topic. Dr. Reed, when is your wedding with Dr. Sue? It should be next month, but I have a strange feeling. Reed said hesitantly, It is not about Dr. Sue, but I have a feeling that the two of us have never really understood each other. We are like the most familiar strangers. This should be the fear before the wedding, the turmoil before the wedding. Luther joked, Reed, I need you to create a machine that can emit high-energy radiation to activate the genes of this embryo. It is our only weapon to counterbalance the alien monster who thinks of himself as a god. When the whole world is cheering for this god, only we see the crisis. He will bring disaster to this world. Although Reed still felt strange, and the ethics of science were not completely unaffected by him, Reed was different from the little spider. He was more confident, or rather, proud of his own intelligence. When he did what he thought was right, he would ignore some moral issues. Reed was a purer scientist. The scientist part of him was even more than the hero part. Therefore, he was also crazier. Every scientist had a crazy gene in them. It was not without reason that mad scientist villains had flourished in the multiverse. The smarter and more outstanding they were, the crazier they were. When Reed went crazy, he was definitely more terrifying than the clown, for example. He would open up the skull of Tony Stark. The little spider hurriedly contacted Bat and the Prophet. In the video call, he said in annoyance, "Everyone, I may have made a mistake." Chapter 1169. Wearing a pair of black leather gloves, Bruce Wayne flipped through the series of documents that the little spider had brought. The documents with the words Lex Group and Top Secret were filled with professional jargon. If Bruce did not have a few tricks up his sleeve, he might not even be able to understand the information recorded here. However, Bruce was indeed one of the smartest humans in the world. As he searched for the information, he deciphered it and forced himself to finish reading it. "Please Baidu search." The little spider sat across from him guiltily and looked at the Prophet and Bruce. The Prophet did not read the documents. It did not matter to her. She only needed to read about the future to figure out the problem. Therefore, the Prophet glared and pretended to be serious to scare the little spider. The little spider sat on the chair timidly. When he saw that Bruce was about to finish reading, he said, "I might have made a big mistake." Bruce put down the documents. "You were right. This project is indeed the biggest secret of Lex Lab. The other projects are obviously not that important. Only this cloning project is Luthor's main focus." The Prophet pointed at the table. "So you helped him finish it?" The little spider answered embarrassedly, "I was just being impulsive. Their train of thought was obviously wrong and they went astray. I just wanted to remind them. Then you accidentally became the leader of the project, and you led these people to complete this impossible project?" The Prophet joked, "You sure are something. If this project is Origin—" The Bat gestured. "Then the embryo is the key. You plan to gradually activate the recessive genes of the embryo and let it grow like a normal human. But Luthor rejected your plan. He wanted the embryo to mature as soon as possible. I investigated Dr. Reed. He was a genius in university. After graduation, he worked for Lex Corporation. He was a genius in science, and he had a girlfriend from university named Sue. But a few years ago, around the time of the accident at the Heart City lab, about 3 months ago, Dr. Reed disappeared. His girlfriend, Sue, called the police. After the incident in Heart City, he returned to the Lex Corporation. The little spider was puzzled. "You mean he participated in an experiment in the Heart City?" What puzzled me was that this key figure, who was obviously involved in Origin, did not join the cloning project after returning to Lex's laboratory. Instead, he began to study astrophysics with the support of Lex. Until today, he became a radiation expert, leading the radiation stimulation cultivation of human clones. Maybe it's an exchange of benefits or something. The Prophet did not care about this unreasonable point. We can confirm that Origin started from the accident in Heart City a few years ago. After that, Origin was moved to Lex Laboratory. But we are not sure what Origin is. Only one person in Metropolis knows what Origin is, and that is Luthor, the Prophet. "Don't ask me." The Prophet shook his head and said, "I couldn't see the experiment accident in the Heart City. That accident created a superhuman who could travel at the speed of light. When the accident happened, a superluminal particle storm formed in the Heart City's cutting-edge laboratory. Even the Prophet couldn't see what happened inside." The Prophet hesitated for a moment. "At least I can't see it. The second Prophet shouldn't be able to either. Forget it. He is a person who hides too much. Maybe he can see through everything? The first Prophet, everyone says he is omnipotent, so he should know what happened there. In short, I can't even see the running figure of the guy who calls himself the Flash. let alone the experiment accident that caused his superpower. I can only confirm that the experiment was not the particle collision experiment that they claimed. When will they start the radiation experiment? Bruce asked Peter. The little spider calculated for a moment. If he is the Dr. Reed, I know it will be very fast. In about 3 days, I have already found out that Lex Corporation is modifying a gamma-ray detector. Dr. Reed is an expert in cosmic rays. In terms of gamma-ray, only Dr. Bruce. I'm not talking about you, Bertman. I'm talking about the other Bruce. Dr. Bruce Banner, only he can match him. If Dr. Banner was here, he should be able to see more things. I can only calculate that with Luther's current ability to assemble the instruments, it will take them at least 3 days to build a laboratory that meets the standards. We must stop Zorro's experiment. Bruce said nothing more. Chapter 1170. Thanks to the prophet's prophecy and little spiders spying with the eye of Agamotto, they finally confirmed that the next step of the experiment on the cloned embryo would be carried out in the Lex Corporation's laboratory. Batman came up with a plan to ambush the experiment and obtain more information on Origins. Bruce had already decided that this time he would capture Luther and interrogate him to find out what Origins really was. Little Spider disguised himself as Dr. Parker and snuck into the laboratory. The Prophet was ready to back him up at any time. As for Batman, he had his own ways to sneak in. Because of what happened the day before yesterday, Little Spider was no longer allowed to approach the laboratory where Bizarro's strong radiation experiments were being conducted. But this was not a problem for him. He easily stole an identity card that gave him access to the radiation laboratory. Through the simple AI in the Crimson Mech's hand armor, Little Spider gained control of the electronic access to the laboratory. After taking over the security check, and with Spider's sensing ability, only Batman could compete with him when it came to infiltrating a place to complete a mission. Little Spider wore a white lab coat and very naturally weaved through the crowd of researchers. When he reached a position close to the radiation laboratory, he turned right and snuck into the toilet. He took out the spider suit from his backpack and put it on in a fluster. At the same time, he used the device on the suit to call Batman. I'm close to the radiation laboratory. They're adjusting the equipment. The experiment will start in about an hour. Where are you? Batman was lying in the ventilation duct. Through his bad equipment, he had already shielded the ventilation duct sensors. But with his huge build and his heavy equipment, squeezing into a small ventilation duct, of course, he did not look good. You could say that he was very pathetic. But what made Bat so awesome was that no matter how pathetic he was, as long as he spoke with that husky, magnetic voice of his, everyone would imagine him to be very awesome and at ease. It was just like how James Bond had to climb into the sewers to get close to the information. He stank all over, but in everyone's mind, he was always dressed in a suit and looked like an elegant British gentleman. 10 minutes later, begin the next step. Bat did not answer the question of where he was, and simply gave the order. At this time, Luther brought Reed to the ventilation duct where Bat was lying. Bat's eyes narrowed, and he took out a small, bat-shaped vibration sensor from his back. The sound received by the device would be transmitted to the headphones in his ears. Dr. Reed, congratulations on the success of your experiment. Luther elegantly picked up a glass of champagne. Dr. Reed waved his hand and refused. Sorry, I don't drink during experiments. Did Dr. Parker create the experimental subject Bizarro on his own? Luther nodded and said yes. Unfortunately, he is a stubborn ethical person. Dr. Reed sighed and said, Dr. Parker can be said to be a genius in the field of cloning and retroviruses. To this day, I still haven't been able to understand some of his theories and technologies. He used a semi-cloning method to insert sample gene fragments, and even used quantum communication technology to use the sun as a signal amplification device and energy source, releasing electromagnetic waves with special frequency radiation to slowly activate Bizarro's invisible genes. The cloned body created this way is a normal and healthy life form. Using gamma rays to stimulate Bizarro's growth is a dangerous and wrong method. Dr. Parker hoped that Bizarro is a complete life form. Luther said lightly, but Lex Corporation does not need a complete life form. We need a weapon to control it. This world already has a complete extraterrestrial life form. We do not need a second inferior copy. There can only be one God in the world. Luther said with disdain, Lex Corporation will not create a second one. So, Bizarro will be a super soldier, a weapon of war, a preventive measure. Luther pointed at the embryo under the gamma ray detector. As expected, Bat thought to himself, Bizarro is a clone of Superman. They want to use Superman's power to create an army, a powerful military force. Luther, who was below, complimented Reed. Dr. Reed, you only used 3 days to understand Parker's cloning technology. You are the real genius. Reed shook his head in surprise. No, 3 days is more than enough. If I can't figure it out in 3 days, I won't be able to figure it out no matter how much time I have. I only figured out some of Dr. Parker's simple biological technology. As for the real core, the retrovirus, I have yet to figure it out. Dr. Parker is no less of a genius than I am. Also, I feel that his technological thinking is somewhat familiar. Reed frowned. I feel like I have overlooked something. The spider was already wearing a tight-fitting combat suit, but he was still wearing a white lab coat. He took off the hood, just like a normal Dr. Parker. But when the time came, he took off the hood, and with a tug of the white lab coat, he became the most wanted criminal by the committee, Spider-Man. After coming out of the toilet, the little spider casually greeted the passing researchers. Dr. Parker. The passing researchers looked away guiltily, not daring to look into the little spider's eyes. They already knew that Peter had a falling out with his boss, Luther, because of the project. They also knew that Luther had taken back Dr. Parker's access to the laboratory to prevent Dr. Parker from sabotaging the project. But under their shocked gazes, the little spider came to the security gate and swiped the electronic lock. With a beep, a green light appeared, and the little spider naturally walked into the electronic gate that led to the radiation laboratory. The researcher, who saw all of this, opened his mouth wide. He looked left and right, pretended not to see anything, and quickly walked away. The little spider didn't even try to hide his intention to sabotage the experiment. He wanted to let Luther know the anger of a researcher who had his project stolen. Last time, because his project was stolen, his father, Richard Parker, did not hesitate to destroy all of Oscorp's research materials on the retrovirus. This caused the family of the boss, who had a related genetic disease, to explode. Today, I, the little spider, will make you, the F** king boss who interfered with my project, fly into the sky. Walking into the passage, the little spider put on his mask. He patted it down, and the spider suit automatically expelled all the air. The loose mask instantly stuck to the little spider's head. The little spider walked out of the dark and narrow passage and came to the radiation laboratory. He saw the F** king boss, Luther, standing outside the glass door of the laboratory. The little spider raised his hand and gave him 2 middle fingers. You congenital baldness. You don't know anything, you idiot who interferes. Let go of my project. The little spider raised his hand and gave 2 spider webs to the bodyguards who were about to pull out their guns, telling them to hang themselves on the spot. He walked in front of the bald Luther. Do you think you're a scientific genius with a superhuman IQ? Do you think you can dominate the academic and business world just because you're flattered? Who do you think you are? How dare you touch my project? As the boss, you just need to pay the money honestly. Who gave you the guts to criticize my project? Today, I'll let you know the anger of a scientist. Nonsense. Today, on behalf of Dr. Lizard, Dr. Octopus, Dr. Adrian, and Dr. Doom, I'll get justice. The little spider felt like he was suddenly possessed by the souls of many scientists who had failed in life because of the careless criticism of the capitalists. Dr. Kurt, who wanted to research genetic research to cure severed limbs because of his disability, was about to succeed when the capitalists of Oscorp shut down his research team and kicked him out. In the end, he had no choice but to use an imperfect drug and become Dr. Lizard. Dr. Otto, a nuclear physicist who researched artificial suns and nuclear fusion, was forced by the capitalists to start an imperfect experiment which caused a big bang and lost his wife and career. He could only fuse for steel tentacles and become Dr. Octopus. Dr. Adrian, an electronics engineer who had always dreamed of flying, did countless experiments to create a set of wings that could fly freely like a bird. However, Adrian, who lacked research funds, was cheated by a capitalist and went to prison. In prison, he painfully completed his dream and turned into a vulture that took revenge on the world. He used to be Dr. Reed's boss. As a rising star in the capital market, he provided Reed with research opportunities and led a big project that flew out of Earth. However, because of Reed's miscalculation, he lost everything and became a loser. His fiancée even ran away with Reed, who had caused him such a tragedy. He vowed to take revenge, but just as he was about to succeed, the apocalypse took away everything he had, his body and his name. The tragic villain Dr. Doom, who had never appeared again. At this moment, the little spider was not alone. He was possessed by the souls of many scientists he had defeated. The little spider could proudly claim that he was not the strongest hero among the Avengers, but he was definitely the hero with the highest average education among the enemy villains. He was the natural enemy of many failed scientists. Feel the anger of the scientists. The big capitalist who thought he was a scientist, Luther. Chapter 1171. Do you think fear can defeat me? Luther laughed uncontrollably. He lowered his head to wipe away the saliva at the corner of his mouth and sneered. Fear will only defeat people like you, Batty. Fear will never defeat a truly strong person, a Superman. You're just a mortal after all, Luther said casually. And my goal is Superman. Luther looked into Batty's eyes and said in a low voice, "The Joker came to me before. He always thought that only a lunatic would dress up like a bat and parade around the city. And he just had a sense of humor. He told me that the lunatic who called himself Batman became Batman because of fear. One night, when he was still a child, in a dark alley where a violent incident had just occurred, he brushed against the shadows of a bat flying past the dim street lights. This will become the nightmare of his life. This is the origin of Batman. In a sense, you're a pitiful person who has never been able to walk out of the shadow of his past. So don't talk to me about fear." Luther laughed. "Because I'm fearless and—" Luther smiled like a crazy clown. "You've been tricked." Batman suddenly felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. His combat instincts from fighting crime for a long time and risking his life made him feel alarmed. Batman's body made the most correct, instinctive reaction. He lifted Luther to block his vitals, trying to use Luther to protect his back. But the enemy's attack was too fast. A figure wearing a dark blue uniform and the same red skin as Superman flashed by. A punch landed on Batman's back. He was as fast as Superman, but he didn't have Superman's mercy. After the ruthless and accurate Bizarro made up for Superman's weakness, his threat skyrocketed. Batman didn't even have the chance to dodge. His spine made a crisp sound as Bizarro's punch broke it into 3 parts. Batman was sent flying by the red and blue shadow's punch. He slammed into the wall and collapsed. He tried to struggle, but the broken spine caused him to lose control of his lower body. Even with Batman's strong will, he still couldn't go against the material foundation of his body. There was only one person who could ignore the state of his body with the will of a human, and that was the master of psychic abilities among mutants, Professor X. The little spider was stunned by this sudden turn of events. He did not manage to save Bat in time. Just as Bizarro was about to finish him off and send Batman exploding into the sky, he used the Holy Shield's special high-strength spider silk to trap Bizarro. The crimson glove flew out of the little spider's hand and automatically attached itself to the paralyzed bat's hand. Carrying Bat's body, it flew close to the ground and flew away. The small spider moved forward to entangle Bizarro. He looked at the child that he had created. Bizarro did not look human at all. His body and face were pitted and full of charred scars and festering wounds from the intense radiation. His skin was a deathly gray, as pale as a dead man's. There was no life in him. He wore the same uniform as Superman, but the S on his chest was reversed. It symbolized Luthor's definition of him, the opposite of Superman, a poor imitation and biological weapon. The little spider was completely dumbfounded. He exclaimed, "How is this possible? The prophet clearly saw that you would only carry out the next step of the experiment today." "Yes." Luthor crawled up from the ground and said fervently, "You have a prophet, and a prophet knows everything. But do you think I don't know that you have a prophet? Do you think I don't recognize that you are the wanted criminal who kidnapped the third prophet? I have been pretending to know nothing, just to wait for an opportunity. Only a prophet can deal with a prophet." The little spider suddenly understood. Luthor smiled like a clown. Perhaps the curse was real, and anyone who killed a clown would eventually become a clown. The second prophet had killed the clown from afar, so the clown's spirit had been transmitted to Luthor, who was closest to him. Or perhaps it was just Luthor's crazed side that had shown up, because craziness was like gravity. All you needed to do was give it a gentle push. Yes, only a prophet can deal with a prophet. A figure walked out from the shadows. The third prophet was misled. Of course, it was done by me, the second prophet. It was Chinong. The little spider looked at the very familiar Professor Chin, the commander of the Holy Shield, the insurance investigator, Chinong. For the first time, he felt a huge shadow behind Chinong, enveloping him and encompassing both worlds. Not good. I have to save the prophet. The little spider remembered that the unarmed third prophet was waiting for him outside, but Luthor would not let him escape. Bizarro broke free from the spider silk and stood up. He floated in the air and stared at his creator and nominal father, Peter Parker. Two extremely cold rays shot out from his eyes. The rays that were close to absolute zero could freeze the movement of all particles in the universe, and the speed of the rays was close to the speed of light. Just this move alone could kill most heroes in the Justice Alliance. As an agile hero, the little spider was completely restrained by the rays. Just the freezing air in the area was enough to freeze him. At this critical moment, a golden flash of lightning flashed. Spider-Man disappeared from where he stood. A hero wearing a dark red uniform with a golden bolt of lightning on his ears and chest placed the little spider behind Bizarro. The little spider was still in shock and thanked him. Barry the Flash said shyly, "Don't thank me. It was Bat who asked me to watch you and prevent accidents from happening." Just like now, Barry smiled bitterly. "I don't want to fight Superman again, even if he's a fake." As he said that, Barry touched his face in guilt. He could not forget the time when he was dealing with Superman. Superman had punched him in the face while he was in the state of seraphic speed. As it turned out, Superman could hit him while he was in the state of seraphic speed. Whose clone is Bizarro? Parker sensed that something was wrong. "It seems like you all know his father." "Don't say that, or else Superman will be angry. Superman is good at everything, but he is not very tolerant of people who are too similar to him. He would not think of himself as the father of this monster." Barry said, "I have to call Superman over. Only Superman can deal with this monster." The little spider said sadly, "I'm sorry. I didn't think things would turn out like this." Everyone present, including Luthor himself, thought that Bizarro was an emotionless killer, a biological weapon, a tool of war. But only his creator, the little spider, realized that Bizarro was not emotionless. The little spider had just realized that although Bizarro's rays were scary, they were not fatal. He was being merciful to his creator. Under Bizarro's zombie-like appearance, in his indifferent eyes, The little spider keenly sensed a trace of emotion. Although Bizarro was catalyzed and his emotional system was not fully developed, it did not mean that he did not have it. The little spider was trying to think of a way to wake him up so that he would not be used by Luther. Chapter 1172. Little Spider instantly thought of the key to breaking out of this situation. He said to Barry, "Batman is outside. Protect him and leave this to me." Barry hesitated. "Can you do it?" Little Spider shrugged and sighed. "Why don't you do it?" Barry instantly disappeared, and his voice came from the empty space. "You deal with this monster. I'll protect Batty and find you reinforcements. This is the metropolis. Nothing can escape the eyes and ears of Superman. Superhuman is here." Little Spider urgently adjusted the other modes of the suit that had mass destruction. Although this suit had been given to him for many days, Little Spider had only used the non-lethal weapons on the surface, such as the electrified spider silk or the spider launcher. He had never used the weapons of mass destruction installed on the Holy Shield. "Please, Baidu." Little Spider frantically dodged the beams of cold light that shot out from Zorro's eyes as he operated the suit. Nuclear mode. An option with a radiation warning symbol appeared on the light screen projected from the arm of the suit. Little Spider hurriedly turned it off. Not this. Antimatter mode. The little spider used a strand of spider silk to block the ceiling of the laboratory. He kicked off the ceiling with both legs, and his whole body bounced up from the ceiling. His back was against the ceiling, and he jumped over Zorro's head. He nimbly kicked off the wall, and then rolled into a corridor. Then he frantically ran out. Zorro's breath of flames brushed past his back, and the air in the entire laboratory was quickly burned away. Seeing the oxygen level in the radiation laboratory rapidly decreasing, the faces of his subordinates turned purple, and they were about to suffocate. Luther hurriedly ordered Zorro to stop. He punched Zorro's lower abdomen and said angrily, "Go after him!" While running, the little spider chose antimatter mode. "I've never tried this before. How do I use it?" Just as he chose antimatter mode, Little Spider noticed that the color of his uniform suddenly changed. The original blue and red uniform suddenly became a striking scarlet mixed with some black. This striking color was common in the natural world, including spiders. Most of them were poisonous creatures that acted as a warning to other creatures. Thus, it was also known as the warning color. At this time, the small spider's red and black uniform was the alert color of the black widow spider. It was the color of a highly venomous species of the black widow, the Australian venomous redback spider. "It looks cool, but I still don't know how to operate it." The little spider complained as it ran for its life. User's voice request detected. Voice sprint detected. Activating auxiliary AI. Activating teaching mode. After the user learns how to operate antimatter mode, he can use the command to turn off teaching mode to turn off the auxiliary AI. An electronic voice suddenly rang in the headset of the combat suit. The little spider was stunned. He hesitated for a moment before saying, "Hey, I didn't know you were in my battle suit. You really hid yourself well." Information related to the auxiliary AI exists in the Spider Battle Suit's user manual. Seeing that the small spider was speechless, who told him to rely on the fact that he participated in the development of his own battle suit. Ever since he received the battle suit, he had never flipped through the user manual. The area of artificial intelligence wasn't handled by the spider sensor team that the small spider was in, so who knows when it was integrated into the system. The spider wasn't Batman. Why would Stark, a skeptic and conspiracy theorist, check his suit thoroughly for no reason at all? An extremely cold ray brushed past the small spider and almost hit him. Only then did the small spider come back to his senses. He shouted, "Don't talk so much. Hurry up and activate the weapon." Antimatter destruction cannon charging activated. When the small spider heard such a horrifying notification, he didn't even care that Zorro was still chasing after him. He shouted, "Don't use this. Is there anything with less lethality?" The auxiliary AI paused for a second before continuing. Stop activating antimatter destruction cannon. Activating anti-electron neutrino high energy photon beam. The small spider could not see his own face. 6 green compound eyes suddenly appeared on the red and black mask that was originally quite cool. The 6 green compound eyes, together with the original scarlet eye mask, reflected bits of green fluorescence. Each compound eye was made up of countless tiny eyes. The red and black mask and the 8 green compound eyes that extended from the normal eyes to the back of the head changed the small spider style. He changed from a cool scarlet spider to the second Venom, the Cthulhu Hunter style. These dense compound eyes were laser emitters, or antimatter laser emitters. Ordinary laser emitters could not be made too small. Only the antimatter high-energy photon beam was created by the annihilation of a pair of positive and negative electron neutrinos, releasing a pair of high-energy photons. In the case of antimatter being prepared in advance, the equipment needed for this reaction was the simplest. The Ruby laser generator was much simpler and could be made to the size of nanometers because the most difficult job was how to create antimatter. But the small spider did not have to worry about this because the battle suit was charged and the antimatter inside had already been created by the Holy Shield. In the projection screen that his eyes saw, there was a battery-like sign, which was the antimatter reserve. A compound eye was made up of about 28,000 miniature laser emitters. The workmanship of these laser emitters added up might not be enough to make a qualified Holy Shield high-energy laser emitter. But these compound eyes were made like this for a reason. These were countless precision laser emitters. The principle was a new type of weapon proposed by the SBL, the microphoton interference device. It was also known as the photon beam weapon. A long time ago, scientists discovered that the lethality or destructive power of lasers had nothing to do with the energy level, but was related to the number of photons per unit area and the energy level. The more the laser was constrained, the stronger the lethality. However, too many photons would cause damage to the generator. After reaching a certain magnitude, no other generator could gather so many photons. Therefore, the SBL changed their way of thinking. They adopted the principle of solar stoves. Since they couldn't make a concentrated laser, they could make use of the fact that light traveled in a straight line to gather the scattered lasers into a focal point. This was the same principle that most people used to burn ants with a magnifying glass in their childhood. However, the simple principle of burning ants produced 2 major weapons of the SBL, the stellar focal length weapon and the photon beam weapon. The stellar focal length weapon was an extremely large lens placed in front of the star to burn ants' planets. The photon beam gathering weapon, on the other hand, used a minimized laser emitter. In the minimized laser emitter, small and high-energy photon beams were created. Then the AI was used to fine-tune the laser emitter, and finally, all the photon beams were gathered at a focal point. Because the photon beam was only a few meters in size, the focus point was only the size of a meter. With so many high-energy photons gathered at such a concentrated point, the destructive power was astonishingly strong. When such dense and active high-energy photons passed through the focus point, they would inevitably collide with the nucleus of the atom at the focus point, resulting in a photo-induced nuclear reaction. Gamma photons with energy greater than a certain amount of interaction with the nucleus of the atom, emitting particles. Of course, there was also the possibility of a nuclear resonance reaction. The incident photons would excite the nucleus to an excited state, and gamma photons would be released when the excitation was de-excited. No matter what, it would produce astonishing lethality. If the stellar focal length weapon was a weapon of mass destruction, then the photon beam weapon was a weapon that targeted an individual with astonishing lethality. Originally, no one developed this weapon because the energy level of this weapon was too high. Why would they spend so much money on a target that could be killed by a single bullet? There was no need for this kind of individual high-energy weapon. However, after the apocalypse destroyed the original universe of the SBL, this situation completely changed. The SBL's revenge required the development of this terrifying weapon that targeted super-powerful individuals. Peter was completely unaware of the series of games and changes behind this. His impression wasn't this a laser? He had never thought that he would release a demon that was many times more terrifying than a nuclear weapon. The photon beam gathered at a focus point that was only a few meters wide, and then the 8 compound eyes rapidly changed the trajectory of the laser, forming a line made up of countless such focus points. This line sliced across Zorro's head. A photon beam slashed across Zorro's head. As the small spider stared in shock, Zorro's head fell off. If he was a Superman, he would really be dead. Fortunately, Zorro was a biological weapon, and Luthor didn't have to think about him at all. Without a head, the thinking organ was dead. If he were to clone another one, would he still be himself? This was a profound question that involved self-identity. Zorro was a biological weapon that had transformed into a zombie. What was there to be afraid of without a head? Just grow another one. The flesh on his severed neck wriggled, and a brand new, baby-sized, soft head grew out from the flesh. It quickly matured, and very soon there was no difference from before. The support AI said in the small spider's ear, "After analysis, this life form's activity is relatively strong. Do you authorize the use of a matter annihilation weapon? Only half of the antimatter reserve is needed to annihilate the basic matter that makes up this life form. The large amount of energy produced can also be used to recharge the combat suit and activate antimatter mode too." The small spider instinctively refused. No, he hesitated for a moment. Let's find his sample mother. Destroy the surrounding magnetic restraints and sound absorption devices. The small spider ordered. In order to prevent the secret of the laboratory from being discovered by Superman, Luthor had long ago installed anti-Superman surveillance devices in the laboratory of the Lex Corporation and the place where he was active. Thus, Barry the Flash had completely miscalculated. Even if there was a huge ruckus here, Superman might not necessarily know. The 6 compound eyes on both sides of the small spider's head looked to both sides, and the original laser-emitting device changed to shooting an antimatter beam. After a short while, a violent explosion tore open the dome of the Lex Corporation's laboratory. When the dust from the explosion slowly dissipated, the small spider keenly noticed that, under the cover of the dust, a striking red cloak was fluttering in the wind, making a sound. After the dust settled, an incomparably fit figure with a handsome, angular face that looked like a statue carved by an ancient Greek knife exuded a suffocating hormonal aura. It was unknown how the small spider would react, but Luthor was about to faint from suffocation. Chapter 1173. Little Spider looked worriedly at the battle between Bizarro and Superman. Don't worry, that monster can't beat Superman. At some point, Barry had returned to Lex's laboratory. He carried Batman in his arms like a princess, but his eyes were fixed in Superman's direction. Barry couldn't carry Batman anymore. He put Bruce down carefully and said in a low voice, Batman hurt his spine, "I need to inform Alfred. Maybe not." Little Spider stretched out his hand, and Batman's crimson glove fell off and flew into his hand. Looking at the mechanical glove covering his right hand, the small spider spread his 5 fingers and placed them on his chest. On the chest area of his scarlet battlesuit, the Black Widow crimson back venomous spider pattern glowed with green light. The spider symbol opened, revealing an eyeball-shaped necklace that glowed with green light. 5 tiny green lasers shot out from the crimson suit's fingertips, shining on the surface of the Eye of Agamber. Scattered runes began to appear on the surface of the artifact. Soon, the runes formed a magic circle made of several circles and arcs. Little Spider's hand, which was holding the crimson glove, twisted slightly, and the magic circle began to spin. The Eye of Agamber opened. Inside, the mysterious gem of time was revealed. "What is this?" Barry looked at the mysterious gem of time and asked in a low voice, holding his breath. This is the Eye of Agamdar, an artifact passed down from generation to generation by Kamartaj sorcerers. It is the artifact passed down by the Sorcerer Supreme. When the last Sorcerer Supreme was exiled from time, he handed it to me, personally. Little Spider didn't even dare to breathe loudly. He carefully held the Eye of Agamdar. Batman looked at the gem that he was very afraid of, but he didn't know what he was thinking. Little Spider aimed the magic circle around the gem of time at Bat's wound. Bat twisted a little. His instincts told him that he was worried, but there was no better way. If he had a choice, he would rather use the pool of Lazarus of the League of Assassins. After all, the daughter of the Master Assassin was his mistress. The little Spider slowly rotated their ray, and a miracle happened in front of the three of them. Batman's spine was hideous and terrifying. There were shattered bones and yellow nerves everywhere. The wound that almost split the entire spine into 3 parts had undergone a dazzling magical change. First, the blood that Barry had lost while running around with Batman flew back into the wound, turning into fresh blood that flowed back into the blood vessels. Then, the soil on the wound kept separating, and the wound was getting fresher. Finally, it returned to the moment when it was first created by Bizarro. Following that, the gaping wounds began to heal, the broken blood vessels began to reconnect, and the torn muscles returned to their original state. Very soon, time flowed back to before it was injured. Although there were still a few old scars on it, they were old wounds just as the wound showed. The little Spider still couldn't control the time gem accurately. He realized that Batman was ready to stop after he healed. But when he stopped, there was a visible bruise on Batman's back. "This is the injury I got when I fought the Joker," Batman suddenly said. He took a deep look at the Eye of Agamotto on the little Spider's chest and buried all his words in his heart. Barry, on the other hand, looked dumbfounded. He pointed at the Eye of Agamotto on the little Spider's chest and said, This is a miracle. Is it a divine artifact created by the ancient sorcerers using the power of lightning speed?" The little Spider put away the Eye of Agamotto and shook his head. "No, it's a divine artifact from our universe, one of the 6 Infinity Stones." "6 Infinity Stones?" Barry asked curiously. "Yes, 6 gems of different colors." The little Spider answered absent-mindedly as he tried to look at the battlefield. Barry took one last look at the green time gem and smiled. Hal will definitely be interested in him. 6 Infinity Stones. Is this the parallel body of the Ring of Light army in the parallel world? The power of the spectrum has different manifestations in different parallel worlds. I'm really curious what your world is like. There's no difference. It's the same group of heroes, some criminals, and a world of constant danger. The little Spider shrugged. His attention was focused on the battlefield next door. Barry saw his worry and comforted him with a smile. "Don't worry, Superman will solve everything. Bizarro is just a clone of Superman, and he's only been born not long ago. He can't be Superman's match." "Superman won't hold back against his clone," Barry said. "He hates this kind of monster that blasphemes life. Once Superman doesn't hold back, the problem will usually be solved quickly. That's what I'm worried about." The little Spider sighed. "I created Bizarro, and I think he has the right to live. He's just being used. And..." The little Spider said with a guilty look, "Bizarro is not just a clone of Superman. The situation is not as optimistic as you think." As they spoke, they felt an earth-shattering tremor. Fortunately, the Lex Corporation's laboratory personnel had been evacuated, and the few present had the means to protect themselves. The 3 of them looked at the center of the battlefield. It had become a ruin, and a huge pit had appeared in the center. Superman, wearing a red cape, was floating above the pit. Bizarro was lying in the pit, looking at Superman above him, expressionless. Seeing Bizarro's hideous face, the lifeless gray body, and the zombie-like life form, Superman looked at this life form that was very similar to himself, and a wave of disgust appeared in his eyes. He hated how humans trampled on life for power and hated how humans tried to copy his actions and creations. Superman floated above Bizarro's head, his eyes ready to shoot out rays to completely erase this ugly clone of himself. Bizarro turned his gaze to the side. Luthor did not care that Superman had easily defeated the weapon he had created, because in his heart, Bizarro was just an imperfect product, just a prototype of a successful idea. One day, he would be able to create a clone that was stronger than Superman. Bizarro's plan would continue to advance, and soon there would be Bizarro 2 and Bizarro 3, an imperfect product that had just been finalized. Its only value might be to collect data from the battle with Superman. Bizarro crawled up from the ground with great difficulty. His body began to rapidly grow flesh, healing the wounds that Superman had created. Bizarro was a quiet person. He was a product created in a laboratory, catalyzed by strong radiation. The radiation had ravaged his body, turning him into an ugly creature. He was a cursed life form. Little Spider did not tell anyone about Bizarro's secret, which was that the retrovirus could not replicate all of Superman's genes. It could only insert fragments of genes, so Bizarro was destined to be incomplete. Little Spider speculated that after he was created, there was a high possibility that he had a problem with his intelligence. His brain development was a serious flaw. Little Spider could not have given birth to such an incomplete life form, so he used some information from the Crimson and some things that he had learned from the Holy Shield to supplement Bizarro's genes. Those things were Steve Rogers' modification information, a part of the formula for Superman's blood serum. Therefore, Bizarro was not an inferior clone of Superman, but an evolved body that could possibly surpass Superman. Luthor also did not know that he could never create another Bizarro, because he did not have the information in the little spider's hands. What he created was the inferior version. Superman's eyes shot out a powerful heat beam, and the temperature instantly reached hundreds of millions of degrees. It could almost evaporate any substance. Bizarro's figure only existed in the powerful heat beam for a few short breaths before disappearing in an instant. The few people present who could look directly at the laser only saw a black shadow exist in the flames for a moment, and then it evaporated. Little Spider was very upset. He could not stop it in time, and he hated himself for hesitating just now. No, Little Spider scratched his head. He means no harm. You can't do this. Barry pulled him back and said, "Calm down, Dr. Peter. He has been hunting us all this time. He may have been a life form that you created, but now he is no longer a normal life form. It might be a good thing for him to end like this." Little Spider was in pain. He shook his head and said, "You don't understand him. If he wanted to hurt us, other than me, no one could stop him. No one could stop him. He had failed not because he was weak, but because he was unwilling to attack his creator. In his eyes, I, Superman, and many of the researchers here are his family. Even though he suffered extreme pain since birth, even though he was forced to listen to a villain, he is essentially a kind life form. He had memories when he was still an embryo. I just realized this." Little Spider pulled up the surveillance footage of the laboratory and pointed at Bizarro's figure. When he was fighting with Superman, although Superman was also careful not to hurt anyone, Bizarro was actually protecting the researchers here as they retreated. You can't see emotion in his eyes, but I can be sure that when he looked at me, when he looked at her, when he looked at us when he was still an embryo, when he looked at all of us who surrounded him and taught him common sense, there was warmth in his eyes. He is still a child. You think he is cruel because he does not have the concept of good and evil, but he knows what love is. In the surveillance footage, Bizarro suddenly blocked a piece of rock that was flying at high speed. At first, no one knew why, but from the surveillance footage, it could be seen that this flying rock could hurt a female researcher who was retreating. Little Spider felt terrible. He took a few steps back and said, "I made a huge mistake. I created a life form, but I failed to protect it." Barry shook his head and said, "Dr. Peter, you might have been possessed." Many people have invested too much emotion in their creations. They've turned their imaginations into reality. The reality is that Bizarro has been hunting us down. He's just a life form that's been twisted since birth. You need to reflect on yourself. Why did you create such a twisted life form? Don't defend him. Little Spider said angrily. I did not defend him. Superman flew down and arrived in front of the small spider. Did you help Luthor create my clone? That's just a young man's mistake. Barry explained to Peter. Peter, he just made a mistake that a scientist shouldn't make. I think we need to give him a chance. There's nothing wrong with him. Batman also explained, which was rare for him. Little Spider, however, was not grateful for their righteous act. He was still looking at the place where Bizarro had died, as if he still had a little hope. Luthor had already called his lawyer over. Maybe Superman would arrest him and take him to the police station. But for a rich man like Luthor, going to the police station was like going home. He still had to sue Superman for destroying his private property. Superman did not let Little Spider go because of his companion's advice. He stood in front of Little Spider and said, This child has to pay for what he has done. He has broken the law. Hearing this, the little spider's suppressed anger suddenly erupted. He said angrily, Then are you going to pay for your crime of murder? Superman did not feel guilty at all. It's not a human. Superman unleashed his super strength, trying to grab the small spider. The small spider's dynamic vision far exceeded that of an ordinary person, but all he could see was a faint afterimage. He was unable to stop Superman at all. But at this moment, a faint, invisible shadow blocked the small spider's path and punched the charging Superman. Chapter 1174. The tattered red cloak fluttered in the air along with the dark red embers. The inverted red symbol was imprinted on the chest of the dark blue uniform. The figure had a body that seemed to be made of iron and steel. The figure had deathly gray skin and a ferocious, burnt face. www.vad2.com. Everyone could see the figure clearly. It was Zorro. In the direction that Zorro was facing, there was a huge blank space. In the Lex laboratory, which was full of wreckage and broken walls, although it was dilapidated, it still retained its general framework. In the direction that the fist was facing, there was only a huge fan-shaped blank space, like the crater created by the impact of an artillery shell on a battlefield. The scorched soil under the floor was exposed. Superman was lying at the end of the trail, dozens of meters away from the small spider. The bright red cloak could only be seen through the collapsed concrete covering him. The cloak on Zorro's back was dark red, like coagulated blood. The cloak on Superman's body was bright red. Barry's face was full of shock, but Batman could not see his expression, which was concealed by the mask. The small spider's hands trembled slightly. He suddenly stretched out his hand, and Zorro bowed his head. Peter pressed his hand on Zorro's head. He looked straight at Zorro's skin, which had been burned by the strong radiation. He looked at the muscles and the burns that were deep to the bone. Hurry up and go. Peter whispered, Leave this to me. I will find a way to cure you. Zorro did not respond. He looked at the small spider deeply, turned his head, and faced Superman again. In the ruins, Superman slowly pushed away the concrete covering his body. His eyes glowed red. Many people insisted that Superman was a demon because, when he shot lasers from his eyes in the dark, they looked extremely evil red. Superman stood up from the ruins. He levitated and looked down at Zorro. A strange smile appeared on Luthor's face. He turned to the small spider and said, It seems that when you created him, you left behind some back door that even I did not know about. I did not. The small spider said solemnly, Life is not meant to be controlled. Zorro rushed towards Superman. His body created a faint white shockwave from the friction in the air. The huge shockwave shook the entire ruins of the Lex laboratory. Zorro rushed in front of Superman. Both of them had the physique of a Kryptonian, so there was nothing fancy about their collision. It was just a punch and a kick. It was the most violent and direct collision. Batman was proficient in hundreds of fighting techniques around the world, but he still couldn't block Superman's simplest straight punch. However, once one's strength reached a certain level, human techniques would lose their meaning. In the Justice League, Superman was the hero who was the least good at fighting. That was because he only needed to use a bit of his strength to defeat most of his enemies. Most of the time, Superman wasn't thinking about how to defeat his enemies, but how to avoid hurting them. Otherwise, wouldn't it be awkward if he used his strength and the ordinary criminal in front of him was annihilated? Superman didn't want to learn human fighting techniques, but Zorro didn't have the time to learn them. Although he looked ferocious, he was still a 2-day-old baby. His personality was still in the stage of ignorance. Other than protecting his mother, he didn't even know what good and evil were. He was a baby with great strength. The battle between him and Superman seemed to be played on 10 times the speed. Most people's optic nerves couldn't capture such a fast scene. Superman's fists landed on Zorro's body, sometimes injuring him. However, these small wounds healed quickly. The next attack of the same strength couldn't even break his skin. Superman loosened the restraints on his body bit by bit. Once again, he used the high-energy laser from his eyes. This time, the high-intensity laser only scratched Zorro's skin. The torn skin revealed a complex structure, which was the mechanism of carbon-based materials. Even a carbon-based body that had evolved to the extreme would have its weaknesses. However, Superman could sense that Zorro was rapidly becoming stronger. His combat instincts were in his attributes, and his body was evolving to become resistant to Superman's attacks. From a certain perspective, Superman's attacks were like a positive stimulus. After this monster was born, he would be able to develop and grow faster. Superman wasn't born to fight, but Zorro was. Now, Superman's all-out attack could only cause Zorro some flesh wounds. It definitely wouldn't be any worse than a normal person getting hit by a cat. And Superman's unparalleled strength was like a cat's paw in front of Zorro. This was the gene fragment of Superman's serum that the little spider had added on his own initiative. Superman's serum was the result of the evolution of the super soldier's serum through the Day Destroyer virus. Superman's serum didn't completely retain the rapid learning ability of the Day Destroyer virus, which evolved to adapt to the opponent's abilities and counter the opponent's methods. But it still retained a part of its learning ability and evolution ability. The little spider had only added some fragments of Superman's serum to make up for the lack of Superman's complete genes. That was why Zorro didn't obtain the complete ability of the Day Destroyer virus, nor could he reach the terrifying power of the symbiosis between Superman's serum and the Day Destroyer virus like Rogers. He only used Superman's blood to evolve from Superman's serum. His ability still came from the man in the red underwear and red cape opposite him. This time, everyone could see it. Superman was at an absolute disadvantage. It wasn't like before, when he was afraid of hurting his opponent, when his hands and feet were tied and he was at a disadvantage on the surface. Instead, he was at a disadvantage when he went all out. The more Zorro fought, the more relaxed he felt, like an adult hitting a child. Finally, Zorro impatiently grabbed one of Superman's hands. Ignoring the crazy output of Superman's other hand, he forcefully pushed Superman to the ground. The world suddenly fell silent. Zorro used his wide palm to pinch the back of Superman's head like a basketball. He lifted him up and walked in the direction of the little spider. Barry and the others were a little nervous, but not panicked, because Zorro's face didn't have any hostility. The little spider let out a sigh of relief and laughed. Although the process was a little out of control, it's all over now. You guys can take Superman away. I'm going to take the kid away and find a place to cure him. After saying that, he looked at Luthor angrily. She dared to meet up with the Prophet. The second Prophet might be looking for trouble with her. How do you usually deal with this lunatic? Peter pointed at Luthor in disdain. Send him to the police station? The little spider was a little unwilling. But other than this, he really didn't have any better ideas. Zorro tossed Superman to Barry and turned to pick Luthor up by his neck. Luther didn't seem to mind. Instead, he laughed nervously and said, "Why are you so serious?" The familiar tone made Batman raise his head warily. Luther hung from Zorro's hand and said in a carefree tone, as if he was swinging on a swing. He swung from side to side and said in a low voice, "Don't look at me like that. I'm not the clown. I'm just a little like him. The clown is trying to prove to me that other people are the same as him. All it takes is a bad day, and anyone can become the clown. Really, all it takes is a little push. We'll fall, and we'll be smashed to pieces. Do you know? There's something in the clown's body. You can call it the clown virus. Killing him will get infected with this virus. Don't look at me like that. I didn't kill him, but the person who killed him used me. You think I'm a schemer, a lunatic, an uncontrollable bomb. No, I'm just a pitiful, manipulated, helpless clown. When he killed him, I was too close. So I became the clown. Now he's also too close." A strange smile that Batman was familiar with appeared on Luther's face. Luther took his own hand and made a cut across his neck. Then he mouthed, "Bang!" Then, right before Batman's eyes, Luther exploded into a cloud of blood mist. Everything happened so suddenly that everyone was stunned. "Those who can't kill me will only make me weirder, and those who can kill me will become me." This sentence appeared in Batman's mind for no reason. He realized, but after Luther exploded into a cloud of blood mist, the high-purity Dionysian gene in his body had already seeped into Zorro's body. All the clues flashed through Batman's mind. Someone killed the clown in front of Luther without showing his face. The virus after the clown's death infected Luther. Luther created Zorro ahead of time under the cover of the second prophet. The one who killed the clown would eventually become the clown. The clown was a kind of virus. It was contagious and would be passed down. Those who got close to the clown would be infected by this madness, and those who killed the clown would also be infected by this virus. Luther himself could prove that even if the clown was a little closer to him when he died, he would still be infected. Then Zorro was already infected. Luther was a bomb. Someone used him and Peter to create Zorro, then used him as a source of infection, and finally infected Zorro. His goal was to create something with the body of Superman and the spirit of the clown, a true Zorro weirdo. This person was undoubtedly the second prophet. He had no intention of doing it himself. He only used Luther to create the most terrifying weapon, the most physically powerful Superman, and the most mentally dangerous Joker. Together, they were the most dangerous existence in the world. So, Luther had been controlled by that person from the beginning to the end. He forced Luther to submit, to be able to easily kill the clown, to be able to induce Peter to create Zorro. This person could only be the second prophet. The second prophet didn't even need to show his face to create an extremely dangerous weapon, an uncontrollable bomb. Batman raised his head and looked at Zorro, who was still in a daze and didn't know what was going on. He said in a low voice, "If I'm not wrong, nothing happened to the third prophet. The ones in real danger are us." He looked at the spot where Chen-Ong had appeared, and as expected, he found a projector there. Chen-Ong watched everything through the screen. Chapter 11, 75. At this time, no matter how slow the little spider was, he should have noticed that something was wrong. On the cell phone, Vought W. Come, he turned around to look at Zorro. Zorro was still standing in the same spot, looking at the little spider. He opened his mouth slightly, as if he wanted to say something, but his bloodless lips only moved a few times. No sound came out. Instead, the corners of his mouth began to twitch uncontrollably. Zorro's eyes were shrouded in a hazy mist. He opened his mouth, and the twitching of the corners of his mouth made his expression very strange. Finally, he shouted for the first time since he entered the world, "Daddy!" "No." The little spider shrieked. He leapt up and leapt in front of Zorro. Zorro's legs gave way and he fell to his knees. He grabbed the little spider's hand like a child, but the Dionysian factor was now flowing towards his heart in a hopeless manner. The Dionysus factor was a type of metal that existed in the pool of Lazarus. It could give a person a powerful self-healing ability, but it could also seriously distort a person's mind. The clown's blood contained a large amount of high-purity Dionysus factor. This metal existed in the form of a nanovirus that could change a person's cerebral cortex, causing the infected person's way of thinking to be similar to that of the clown. It was unknown whether the clown had used the Dionysus factor to create this virus, causing anyone who killed him to become him, like a dragon slayer becoming a dragon? Or did the Dionysus factor have this effect, creating the clown? In any case, all of this was meaningless. In a parallel world, Batman, who killed the clown, was infected with this virus. In the end, he only lasted a few days before becoming a new clown. He massacred the entire Justice League and the Bat family, calling himself the Bat of maniacal laughter. But only Batman's willpower could last a few days. Zorro did not even have a personality. He was just a blank piece of paper. A blank piece of paper that could be easily smeared. Batman could last a few days after being infected with the virus, but Zorro only needed an instant. The corners of Zorro's mouth began to curl up. Facing his father, he did not show any expression of pain. Instead, he slowly revealed a smile that revealed the roots of his teeth, an exaggerated, bizarre, and clown-like smile. Zorro laughed slyly. I feel like my mind is in a mess, as if I suddenly know many things. Father! At this time, everyone knew that something had happened. Barry was at a loss. Batman could only stand in the shadows and watch everything unfold. The only thing he could do was to get rid of Zorro after the tragedy, to prevent more tragedies from happening. And the little spider did not know what to do. He held Zorro's head in his arms, and the little spider did not know what to do. Zorro struggled. The smile on his face was distorted by his struggle, making him look even uglier. He looked like he was laughing and crying at the same time. Peter could only clench his fists tightly and watch as the irreversible events unfolded before his eyes. He sang the lullaby that his father, Richard, sang to him when he was young, as if it could soothe the pain of Zorro's struggle. Zorro raised his head from Peter's embrace, crying yet smiling. Father, even though you're wearing a mask, I can still see that you're crying. What's making you so sad? What you want, what you hate? I destroy everything. Zorro began to laugh like a child, innocent, but with an unusually cruel and evil look. He laughed like a child when he tore off the wings and limbs of a bug with an innocent smile. It was a kind of evil that surpassed good and evil, the purest kind of evil. It was a kind of evil that was different from a clown, but it was somewhat similar. It was a kind of evil that imposed a cruel personality and an evil moral code on the ignorant and innocent. Is it them? Zorro looked at the three leaders of the Justice League, Batman, the Flash, and Superman. He tilted his head and asked, Are they making you unhappy? Father, they make me angry too, especially that person. Zorro pointed at Bat. He looks very annoying. With that, Zorro disappeared from Peter's arms. He appeared in front of Batman in an instant and tore off Batman's right leg, as if he was tearing off a leg of a toy figurine. In Zorro's hands, the muscles that were as tough as steel weren't much sturdier than the toy figurine. Like a naughty child, Zorro began to laugh without empathy. He stared at the blood gushing out from the base of Batman's leg, the exposed bone of the torn leg. Then, like a naughty child, he began to laugh shrilly. Barry, who was watching from the side, was dumbfounded. He was like a confused little deer, his eyes wide open as he stared blankly at the scene before him. Then, like a child who had just seen a deer, Zorro grabbed him excitedly with one hand. Barry activated his seraphic speed ability, wanting to escape from the clutches of this monster that terrified him. But with the power of lightning speed, Zorro used the red cape on his back to drive Barry into his trap, like a hunter. He opened up the red cape and wrapped it around Barry. He grabbed Barry's scalp, his 5 sharp fingernails digging into Barry's scalp. He opened up his 5 fingers, like a basketball player grabbing a basketball the size of his hand. He grabbed the back of Barry's head, then impatiently dragged him to the ground and swung him around. Before Superman could get up, Zero dragged Barry over to Superman. He said in a low voice, "Hey, look me in the eyes." When Superman raised his head, Zorro's eyes shot out rays of extreme cold. Then, faster than anyone could react, he dug out Superman's frozen eyeballs. Two beautiful brown eyes were caught in Zorro's hand like glass balls. Zorro's face revealed a sincere smile. He turned his head and said seriously to Peter, "How about I kill all the people who make Father unhappy?" The little spider was scared out of his wits. He wanted to stop Zorro, but it was as if Zorro knew he was going to stop him. Zorro was one step ahead of him, laughing loudly and shrilly. He dragged Barry and Clark into the sky above the metropolis. He laughed shrilly like a bear in an amusement park. He threw Clark into the sky and let out an ear-piercing scream that destroyed Superman's other senses. He made Barry scream as he flew around Superman. The screams of his teammate infuriated Superman. He thought he had caught hold of Zorro's silhouette, but little did he know that Zorro had purposely exposed him to Superman. Superman spat out an extremely cold breath, wanting to freeze this freshly minted demon. But Zorro only let out a proud laugh before running away. His speed was faster than Superman could have imagined. His screams caused Superman, who had super hearing, great pain. It was like a person with acute hearing was forced to the floor to listen to 100 cats scratching the glass with their claws, or 100 shrews scratching the blackboard with their long fingernails, all the while yelling and cursing nonstop. Superman, who was almost driven to the brink of collapse by Zorro's scream, lost control. Zorro deftly dodged Superman's attack, but he deliberately directed Superman's breath towards the busiest square in Metropolis. Times Square. Superman's icy breath froze everything. Zorro happily flew over the square, like a child squashing ants. He excitedly smashed the frozen passers-by into pieces one by one. He cheered. He used Barry to smash the people who had been frozen into ice sculptures. Barry wanted to break free in anger and fear, but Zorro was like a demon, paying attention to Barry's expression. When he noticed that those people were causing Barry even more pain, he specifically smashed them into pieces. He flew up and pressed the pained and guilty Superman into the pile of cold corpses. He raised Superman and announced in all directions, "This is your hero, Superman." He killed everyone here. He forced Barry to swallow the ice with the flesh and blood of the corpses in his mouth. Poor Barry vomited in disgust. The little spider swiftly traversed 2 streets with its web before it found Zorro. He was screaming and spitting out plasma, his breath burning the citizens of the metropolis to death like ants. When he saw the little spider, Zorro was like a child who had gone crazy from playing. He was excited and couldn't wait to escape from his parents' control. He was prepared to fly to another place and fight with the little spider. The little spider, who saw all this, was in extreme pain. He reached out with his dark red glove to activate the time gem on his chest and then stop time. Zorro flew slowly in the place where time stopped. When he saw the little spider, his face showed a trace of fear. It was the fear of a child. The little spider aimed the time gem at Zorro, his palm pressed against the magic circle formed by the huge green magic energy. With his other hand, he took off his mask. His young face was already covered in tears. The little spider sobbed and said in a low voice, "I'm sorry." The time magic circle slowly turned, and everything in Metropolis that Zorro had destroyed began to flow in reverse. The dead were resurrected, the buildings that had been destroyed by the high-temperature plasma breath were restored, the collapsed buildings were erected, and the heavily injured Barry began to recover. Step by step, they returned to Lex's laboratory. Superman's eyes lit up again, and Batman's leg was reattached. Everything returned to normal, and the strange smile on Zorro's face slowly faded, revealing his previous ignorance and weariness. He looked at the little spider, but the little spider was already crying bitterly. He still could not precisely control the flow of time. When he had treated Batman, he had sent him back to a few days ago. Zorro had been an embryo 2 days ago and had not existed before that. When he used the time gem, he knew that reversing the flow of time in Metropolis and tracing back Batman's state was many times more complicated. In such a complicated project, to accurately determine Zorro's state of time was impossible. As expected, after Zorro had returned to normal, the little spider was already desperately trying to control the eye of Agamotto. But he was still powerless and could only watch helplessly as Zorro's state rapidly reversed. Very quickly, his body returned to a powerful gamma ray, and Zorro once again became an embryo, floating in midair. Then it was the state of an unseen zygote. Then it was some meaningless DNA fragments. He had already turned to dust and disappeared from the timeline. The little spider knelt on the ground weakly, one hand clutching the time gem, the other hand wearing a dark red glove drooping weakly to the ground. He cried bitterly. Chang-Ong watched everything calmly from behind the screen. He was completely indifferent to Zorro's destruction, and he was not angry at the fact that his plan had been foiled, because his plan was to force the little spider to use the time gem to destroy Zorro. I am an emotionless mastermind. Chapter 1176. Just as Chang-Ong wished, the small spider used the eye of Agamotto. The Lex lab was restored by the small spider, and they returned to the lab. The surroundings were untouched, as if nothing had happened. However, the small spider stared at the door of the radiation lab. Someone would never appear again. Luthor, who had been resurrected, slumped to the side, and there was a dejected expression on his face. Batman picked up Luthor, and he asked through gritted teeth, "What is Origin?" A glimmer of light returned to Luthor's eyes. Being toyed with by Chang-Ong had dealt a heavy blow to his confidence. He said in a dry voice, "Origin is Dr. Reed." "What?" The small spider stood up. "Origin has nothing to do with Project Bizarro?" "Yes." Luthor looked disheartened. After being assassinated and resurrected, he hated the second prophet to the core. With a mocking smile on his face, he looked at the small spider and said, "The Bizarro plan was used by me to deal with Superman. It has nothing to do with the committee." A few years ago, just before the incident at the Central City's cutting-edge lab, the committee gathered all the members and informed us of a very critical incident. Dr. Reed had gone missing. Dr. Reed's research was related to the survival of the first prophet. Luthor said, "He seemed to have discovered something in his research, so he wanted to escape from our control." After the committee confirmed that Dr. Reed would no longer work for us, they made a decision to make him disappear. "Wait a minute." Barry gasped. "What does this have to do with the cutting-edge lab in the Central City?" The cutting-edge lab in the Central City is an important research facility for the committee. At the time, it was conducting research on a parallel world. So the committee decided to find another Dr. Reed from the parallel world and have him continue his research. "The Dr. Reed from our world cannot appear again," Luthor said honestly. "So, what did the Dr. Reed that you wanted to get rid of discover?" Batman asked in a low voice. Luthor looked confused. "I don't know. I need to return to the headquarters to remember." "So you decided to get rid of Dr. Reed and find another Dr. Reed from the parallel world." Superman frowned. "The experiment at the cutting-edge lab in the Central City was a success. You found the second Dr. Reed, so what was that big explosion about?" "The particle furnace overloaded," Luthor said casually. "Even if the experiment was a success, there could be all kinds of accidents, right? At the time, we did summon a second Dr. Reed from the parallel world. But the moment he crossed the boundary of the universe, he needed too much energy and the particle furnace was under too much pressure, causing it to explode. After we found Origin, another committee member erased his memory and made him think that he was this world's Reed," Luthor continued. Seeing the heroes' gloomy faces, he laughed. "I know what you're going to say. Hypocritical committee, right? It seems that we, the committee members, are all conspirators hiding in the dark side of the world, And the World Security Council is not to protect the world, but to achieve some kind of dark and unknown conspiracy, right? What if I tell you that the decision on Reed is not made by us committee members, but by the three prophets? Luther laughed. Yes, according to the judgment of all the prophets, Dr. Reed's actions had endangered the safety of this world. The prophets believed that his actions would cause the world to slide into the abyss. After the judgment of the three prophets, the committee made the decision to make him disappear. At the same time, to prevent the parallel Dr. Reed from having the same problem, we erased his memory. The small spider refused to believe it. The third prophet is on our side. If Reed is the origin, and the judgment of the three prophets was made, why didn't she tell us? She doesn't know. Luther answered. He laughed. You have no idea how many times the committee has saved the world. The three prophets monitor the entire world. Once there is a factor that threatens the world, they will sense it, make a judgment, inform the committee, and the committee will solve it. We have determined that the kid who developed superpowers from the Central City experiment, yes, it's you, Barry. The prophets have observed that if your speed breaks through the time barrier and disrupts the normal timeline, it will endanger the entire universe, causing a crisis called the flashpoint, where the entire universe will be overturned and rebooted. The prophets once considered whether to eliminate this unknown risk in advance, but later, the three prophets thought that the crisis you caused was not inevitable, so they rejected this proposal. They submitted a report to the committee, and one of the committee members set up a mental hint for you. Under any circumstances, if you want to run too fast, surpass the speed of light, and return to the past, your body will overheat and endanger your life. But there is still a minority report that erases you, which is kept in the headquarters. Once the committee thinks that you have broken through the limit and started to move towards the flashpoint, then we will use this report to erase you. And you, the son of Krypton. The committee discovered you when you came to Earth in a spaceship. At that time, the third prophet had not yet been born. At that time, the third prophet was a psychic known as Professor. His lower body was paralyzed, and he could only move around in a wheelchair. At that time, the prophets predicted that this world would attract the attention of many powerful enemies because of your birth. But the prophets did not want to kill you because you were not a decisive factor in the crisis. You see the World Security Council as an unreasonable organization that will eliminate any danger as soon as it discovers it, and you see us as madmen who eliminate all threats. But you don't know that unless there is no second possibility, we're not willing to eliminate future risks and crises by eliminating one person. Am I right? Luther looked back and said, The third prophet? The third prophet walked out of the darkness and sighed. You are right. The prophets are the ones who control the committee from losing control. I thought that the three-prophet system was perfect because we never go to extremes. Every decision must have an antagonist who thinks on the opposite side, and every decision must have an opposing report. I thought the prophets had no selfishness or secrets. I have always been loyal to the three-prophet system created by the first prophet. You, too, Luther. The third prophet knew first. But we have already felt that the crisis is approaching, Luther sighed. Because the second prophet has begun to break the rules of the game, we have to rethink everything about the organization, the three-prophet system, the first prophet, and the destruction of the world. These secrets must be hidden in the dark side of the organization. The only way to determine whether the organization is out of control is get those minority reports. The third prophet agreed. See how the prophets of the antagonist think and see the secrets behind the decisions of the organization. This time, the second prophet's plan used a secret of the Joker. I remember that the prophets predicted that the death of the Joker would cause Batman to destroy the world in some coincidental situation. In the end, the prophets issued a report. As long as Batman did not kill the Joker, we would not use that minority report to deal with the crisis. The third prophet sighed. Now it seems that someone has already seen that Minority Report. Or the second prophet was the antagonist back then. Luther replied. The third prophet shook his head. The opposition, who issued the Minority Report back then, was the first prophet. The Minority Report is something that the prophets have to include the decisions of the prophets as variables that have already happened. It is a prediction of the prophet's decision to change the world. When the first prophet predicted the world after the prophet's decision to change the world, it is like an equation that includes a known variable. Then, as a part of the known variable, we can't predict the world after the Minority Report is issued, because in that future, the Minority Report is a variable in a Schrödinger state. We can all predict the world before the Minority Report is known, but we can't predict the world after the Minority Report is read, because we can't grasp the variable of the Minority Report. It is also a prophet's prophecy, and it has uncertainty. That's why the prophet can only predict that timeline after the Minority's Report has been read. The reason why we are not worried about the Minority Report being leaked is because once someone reads the report will be known to the prophet. This isolated variable will start to affect the world, and the prophet will know everything recorded in the Minority Report and who read it. Unless this person is also a prophet, he is a variable, so the Minority Report will continue to be in a state of uncertainty. The third prophet finally revealed another unknown secret of the three prophet system. The Minority Report was not only another possibility outside of the prophet's prediction. It was not only a prophecy of the prophet as an opponent, but also a prophecy of the opponent. The prophecy after the three prophets made a decision and changed the world. If we take the small spider as an example, the three prophet system predicted that the small spider would destroy the world. A prophet as an opponent first predicted that the small spider would not destroy the world. After the three prophet system made a decision and began to hunt down the small spider, the prophet as an opponent had to bring the decision of the three prophets into the prophecy again. In other words, he predicted that the world would be changed because of the prophecy of the three prophets. At this time, he came to the conclusion that because the three prophets predicted that the small spider would destroy the world, the small spider did not destroy the world. In order to avoid this prophecy from interfering with the established outcome, this conclusion would be sealed as a Minority Report. To avoid the occurrence of a prophecy that someone would destroy the world, a prophecy that someone would not destroy the world because of this prophecy, and a prophecy that someone would not destroy the world because of this prophecy, in the end, the world would be destroyed by someone else. Such endless paradoxes would appear. Because of this situation, the Minority Report could not be known by anyone other than the prophet himself. Because it was only related to the prophet, it was an existence related to the closed loop of the world. Its conclusion would not affect the world in any way, so it would not affect its conclusion. Only when a prophecy was not known by anyone would it be the most accurate. This was a prophecy without an observer. It would not cause any change to the world, so it could not be sensed by the prophet. Once it was sensed by an observer, it would appear in the world and be sensed by the prophet. In other words, the prophet would be able to sense the prophecy of the Minority Report. The world would once again enter the paradoxes of continuous prophecy. Unless the observer of the Minority Report was also a prophet, it would be like a number in a black box. When it was taken out of the black box, all the observers would know the number. But if the number was related to an unknown, then even if it was taken out of the black box, it would still be unknown. This was the three rules of the Minority Report. The Minority Report could not be sensed. Once it was sensed, it would be discarded and considered as a report submitted by a known prophet. Once the Minority Report was sensed, it would be sensed by the prophet, unless it was sensed by another prophet. The Minority Report would only be activated after the existing report could not be carried out. In summary, the prophet predicted what would destroy the world, and the committee would form a decision based on the prophecy, with a prophet as the opposition. The prophet began to prophesy how the committee would change the world after the action, and the prophecy would be sealed as a Minority Report. once the committee found out that their actions could not change the fact that the world would be destroyed. Chapter 1177. The neon lights flashed outside the window. No one knew that just a few hours ago, this place had suffered a devastating blow. This city had been on the brink of disaster, but it had managed to avoid it and survive. The metropolis was still bustling and lively. Compared to Gotham, this was truly a modern open city. The little spider who had taken off his uniform was wearing a hooded t-shirt that was commonly worn by American teenagers. He was so young that he looked like a teenager from a nearby high school. He looked out the window for a long time, and the sense of alienation from this world became more and more obvious. It was as if he was living in the shadows of this city, a completely different dimension from the glamour of the metropolis. In the picture, the little spider was light gray, and he did not have a sense of existence in the space. This was not an adjective, but a description of a fact. The prophet had knocked on the door and walked in, but she did not notice him immediately. The prophet sat before the little spider and said, "I suddenly could not see you. I might have gone somewhere else." The little spider changed the topic. "The clothes you picked for me fit me very well. That is because I am very familiar with you, including your size." The prophet smiled ambiguously and went with the flow to lie on the little spider's single bed. She looked at him teasingly and said, "Guess which timeline, which future? I have not tasted you again." She gave the little spider a very suggestive look. The little spider was so scared that he stuttered, I did not." "Wait, you did not come to me to talk about this, did you?" The prophet sighed and gave up on teasing the innocent little spider. She sat up on the bed. "Just now, you disappeared from the timeline. In that instant, all the future about you disappeared. I could not see you. It was like I had suddenly arrived outside of time." The little spider finished the sentence. "You really do know what happened to you." The prophet said seriously, "Peter, you should have told me. This is just a necessary price." The little spider sat down and said, "Don't tell me you also think there is no price to pay for using a divine artifact that can reverse everything? When you break the order of time, time will also bite you. I interfered with the laws of time, so I was naturally rejected by the laws of time until I was banished out of time. This gem, the Eye of Agamotto, originally belonged to a mage. He was my comrade. When we fought side by side against the invaders, you used a divine artifact to reverse time and saved a destroyed city. Then, right in front of us, he was captured by an existence outside of time. The river of time protects us from the spying of some monsters outside of time. Once you break the laws, you will be rejected by time until you are banished outside of time." The prophet said nervously, "What about now? Are the monsters outside of time also targeting you?" The little spider did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Do you still remember the mage I mentioned? He's doing pretty well outside of time. He took action to isolate the existence outside of time from spying on me. He's now a dimensional mage. So when I was repelled by time, I happened to meet him." The little spider did not lie. After using the Eye of Agamotto and reversing the time of the entire metropolis, he found that there was a problem with himself. He began to gradually alienate himself from the world. Sometimes when he was in a daze, he felt that not even a second had passed, but his surroundings had changed. He walked on the street, preparing to return to the hotel, and in a trance he seemed to brush past something on the road. He found that the sky was already dark. He stood on the street, and there was no contact with the bustling traffic and people around him at all. It was as if they existed in two different worlds. The time of this world began to reject him, and he would occasionally appear to be out of tune with his surroundings. At that time, it happened to be when time's protection for him was at its lowest. Peter thought that he would be captured by the existence outside of time, just like when he saw Strange disappear on the battlefield with his own eyes. But when he was most strongly rejected by time and felt that he had disappeared in this time, he suddenly felt someone standing in front of him and looking at him, as if the two of them were separated by a rough glass window. He could only vaguely make out a rough outline, and he could not see the nose or the eyes clearly, but he could still hear that person speaking. "Peter, I'm strange. Don't worry about me. I'm doing quite well outside of time. The natives here are very warm. In general, I'm doing quite well. I've already become a representative of a small, simple dimension. Perhaps I can be considered a third-rate dimensional lord. This has given me some power, and I can protect you from being captured by some dimensional lord who has a grudge with me. I can only tell you some things when the barrier between you and me is at its weakest. First, be careful of Chun-Ong. Pay attention to him. He's the hand behind everything. Believe me, he's hidden deeper than you think, and the truth behind him is also more terrifying than you think. Because of some unspeakable reasons, I can't tell you these things in detail. I can only say that among the many dimensions outside of time, he's one of the most terrifying dimensional lords. Compared to him, Doma of the Dark Dimension is just a small character. His origins are very ancient and can be traced back to the origin of civilization. He's part of the myth and some kind of dark hand that runs through history. He once interfered deeply in the affairs of us mages. Secondly, there's a problem with this world. It's not that simple. The voice became more and more ethereal, and in the end, the little spider could only hear some faint murmurs. It was a strange sound that could not be described with words. He found that this sound began to affect his mind. When he came back to his senses, he had already begun to return to time. Then, the sound outside of time was a kind of pollution and interference. It became very strange, mixed with the whispers of history, some stories of the past, and some prophecies of the future. It was very chaotic and strange. This was because this was a sound outside of time. After entering time, it was tainted with some light and shadow and information of history and the future, becoming distorted and unreal. In the end, Peter had no choice but to use the time gem to continue staying outside of time. Only then did he hear strange final instructions. Pursue the truth, but don't be confused or hurt by the truth. Read is the key. You have to work closely with him. Finally, find your ally. Other than Chin-Ong, anyone in this world is worthy of trust and cooperation. This world is closely related to our world. The familiar people and things you see are all real. Finally, I wish you good luck. Spider Mage, learn more magic. As a supreme mage, you're using technological means to use the Eye of Agamotto. It's really too much. Don't be afraid of making mistakes, because everything can be redeemed. And this world has nothing to lose. What did he tell you? The prophet looked at the little spider's brown eyes and asked. The little spider lied and said, he asked me to learn magic, learn how to use the Eye of Agamotto to save him. The prophet breathed a sigh of relief and said, you can't trust him so easily, because he may not be the mage you know. This may be a monster outside of time using his image to lure you into their trap. Or it may be that the mage himself is no longer trustworthy. You don't know what happened after he was banished to time. Anything is possible. The second prophet said a scholar who has been away for 3 days should be looked at in a new light. It means that a person who is away for 3 days may undergo a shocking change. You have to dig out your own understanding of him from your eyes, wash it, and look at him again. It means that a person who is away for 3 days cannot be trusted. I'll be careful. The little spider changed the topic and said, right, do you know anyone who is proficient in magic? Chapter 1178. The law of the world should be like this. There is a cause and there is an effect, an equivalent exchange. You reap what you sow, mortals live within the rules. Their lives are limited within a framework. It is order, it is rules, it is common sense, it is limits. It is a kind of restraint, but it is also a kind of protection. In short, there is a rule in the heavens. What about us? We cheat. We despise the rules. We play with the laws of the universe. We make it give us karma. We reap without sowing. We look for loopholes. We trample on contracts. We are mages. Mages are the ones who trample on the rules. They are cheaters. Constantine lowered his head and lit a cigarette. He walked through the dark alley outside the bar. The weak light from the lighter cast a long shadow on his back. He took a deep puff and slowly exhaled a ring of smoke. Constantine stepped unsteadily on the puddles of filthy water as he staggered forward. A dark shadow appeared in front of him. He was leaning against the wall, right in front of Dottie's pet shop where Constantine lived. Constantine did not hesitate. Who the hell knew who would come looking for him? He had so many troubles that he did not want to deal with them. As mentioned before, the ways of the heavens are constant. Cheaters have to pay the price. Though no one knew the reason or the specific method, the price was inevitable. Constantine had long understood that from his 20 years of experience, which was why he gradually distanced himself from magic and relied on swindling to make a living. After all, he was a cheater who was targeted by the regulators. Mages could distort time and space, control other people's thoughts, and create life. There were no rules to them. That was magic. It made mages a very dangerous existence to others and to themselves. The little spider greeted the dispirited man who was walking toward him. "Hi, you are John Constantine? I was introduced to you by someone. She said you are very resourceful. Then did she ever say that I'm a scum?" Constantine casually replied, "Where did you meet her? Moonlight Rabbit Manor? Or Madame Share's ranch? Tell her I have money, and I will pay the bill, or she can take a cut from your commission. Or has she already taken a cut?" "She did mention that to me," the little spider emphasized. "But it's not to the extent that you'll owe female workers service fees." "Huh." Constantine laughed. "The service fee for female workers. Let's just call it the escort fee. She suggested me to look for Shadow Contract, Shazan, Madame Xanadu, Sage Ouchie, Faust, Witch, Dr. Fate. She knows all of these people, and they are all more reliable than you. But I still made up my mind the moment I heard your name." The little spider shrugged. "Because he used your name. I think this proves that you're unusual. Every user of magic is different." Constantine sighed. "But you didn't come here because of the advertisements. In fact, you're the kind of customer I hate the most. Customers who come here because of advertisements or acquaintances are just pitiful people who are pestered by unclean things. But for someone like you, if you're introduced by someone in uniform or someone in the industry, it's usually big trouble. And I don't want to get involved in that kind of trouble." The little spider was silent for a moment. He decided to use the method that the prophet had taught him before he left. The prophet did not want to meet this scumbag. He did not even want to breathe in the same city as him. So the little spider came to Constantine alone, who told him to stop walking when he heard that name. Chun Ong had used that name in his original world. The little spider knew that very well. Those people are also poor. The little spider was a little embarrassed, but he still followed the prophet's instructions and recited the words, "And I'm rich." Constantine's eyes were bloodshot and lifeless, but they instantly lit up. He straightened himself and looked at the little spider solemnly. "How rich?" The little spider let go of himself and whispered like Batman, "Being rich is my superpower." Constantine looked at the little spider, who was dressed like an ordinary student. He felt that the little spider's words were not convincing at all, but strangely, he could tell that it was the truth. It did not matter if he was rich or if the person behind him was rich. No, it was very important. Constantine was not a man who cared about money. It was just that money was more important than his life. "Come in." Constantine pushed the door open. The little animals in the pet shop were startled. Some dogs started sniffing loudly. An old woman's voice came from the attic. "Is that you?" "Constantine, I heard a noise downstairs." Constantine shouted, "It's me, Mrs. Dottie. Why are you so late? But I'm relieved that you're back." Constantine led the little spider through the cage of the dead pet. He pushed open the door to the basement. The little spider glanced at the attic. He missed the familiar family atmosphere, but the little spider still reminded Constantine, "You look like you get into trouble easily. Then you shouldn't live with ordinary people." "People who cause me trouble are usually reasonable," Constantine said. "Besides, I don't have the money to rent a single room. If you give me enough money this time, who wouldn't want to move out?" The little spider could understand the helplessness of poverty. All animals can disrupt divination magic. Don't be fooled by their low energy, but they are very useful. As long as you know this, any ordinary thing can cause trouble for your opponent, Constantine explained. "Does the ability of a prophet count?" the little spider suddenly asked. Constantine suddenly turned around and stared at the little spider with a sharp gaze. "A prophet?" He used one hand to pull away the animal products hanging from the ceiling. There were dried bird and lizard corpses, processed skulls, and other random things. The basement was as messy as a shop for witchcraft supplies. There were all kinds of strange things from different civilizations. There was a specimen that looked like an octopus in the sink, an exaggerated mask of a native from Africa or the South Pacific, and a specimen of a two-headed gorilla. "You mean the prophet?" Constantine hinted. "The prophet with 3 heads." The little spider looked at Constantine's collection excitedly. He praised, "You look very reliable. Even though I'm a sorcerer too, a sorcerer paragon, I don't know any magic, so the prophet asked me to give it a try. I don't teach magic." Constantine shook his head. 10 million USD. Chapter 1179. I want to learn magic. Constantine walked to the bookshelf behind the pile of junk. His fingers slid along the shelf for a while before he pulled out a book and flipped 2 pages on the old black parchment book. He asked the spider, "Do you have any foundation?" The spider knew nothing about magic. For example, some books on mysticism circulated among the commoners, like Solomon's 72 Keys. Constantine thought for a moment and decided to lower his requirements. After all, the little spider had already said that he did not know any magic. In that case, Constantine would lower his requirements to the level of a mysticism enthusiast. The spider blushed. "If you ask me about retroviruses or DNA decomposing enzymes, I can answer you, but these things, I've never heard of them. If you're talking about the basics of magic, I know the 2nd and 3rd versions of D&D, and I've played COC before. I have a level 80 Warlock account in World of Warcraft, and I've played magic cards before when I was a kid. I've read Tolkien's complete works and bought J.K. Rowling's new books, although I've only read the 5th Order of the Phoenix book. I've also watched King Arthur's new series, British Gay." "Huh, that's awesome." Constantine was completely stunned. If it were Chunong, he would have been praising the spider's solid magic foundation and started teaching the basics of arcane magic, magic words, spells, and magical animals. But Constantine, he was not a traveling magician. Constantine shook his head. No, not those. The necromancy books of ancient Egypt, hieroglyphs, and Christian theology, his words were a little confused. "All right, you have no foundation. You're a sorcerer?" "The Sorcerer Supreme." The spider nodded. "What game is the title of the Sorcerer Supreme?" Constantine nodded. "The Sorcerer Supreme is the leader of the Kamartaj sorcerers, and Kamartaj is—" The spider instinctively wanted to explain, but it suddenly realized that there was too much to explain, so it sighed. "The Sorcerer Supreme is the title of a great sorcerer from another world. He was originally my comrade, but my comrade was exiled from time because he abused the power of time. Before he left, he gave me the divine artifact passed down by the Sorcerer Supreme. I'm an ordinary person who does not know magic at all. And now I need to use the power of a divine artifact, so I came to you to learn magic." Constantine snapped his fingers and pointed at the spider. "That's a very clear explanation." He took out his lighter and asked, "Mind if I smoke?" The little spider could only say that she did not mind. Constantine picked up the half-full bottle of whiskey from the bookshelf and took a sniff. He frowned as he thought about how long the bottle had been here. He poured a glass for himself and a glass for the little spider. "John, it's illegal for you to make me drink now." The little spider quickly waved his hand and refused. "John, it's illegal for you to make me drink now." "So, you're learning magic just to use that divine artifact?" Constantine asked in a drunken manner. His blonde hair was messy, and his eyes were secretly observing the little spider, trying to find where the divine artifact was. The little spider reached out his left hand from his sleeve. He wore the glove of the crimson mechanical suit, and the glove held an oval pendant. The pendant seemed to be made of brass, consisting of a circular copper plate that looked like an iris and a pupil, and a crescent-shaped copper plate that extended to both sides to form the shape of an eye. The circular copper plate was the symbol of Master Kamartaj. It looked like the lines of latitude and longitude on a globe. The eye of Agamotto caught Constantine's attention as soon as he took it out. He reached his hand toward the eye of Agamotto, but his finger stopped a foot away from the divine artifact. He focused on examining the divine artifact and exclaimed, "A very powerful protection spell. This artifact is protected by some very powerful spells. Anyone who is not its owner will pay a terrible price if they try to take it away. Its core is an abnormally powerful magical artifact. The artifact's power is bound and used by a mage's incantation. This artifact is an extremely powerful magical artifact." "Looks like what you said wasn't a lie. This style and the runes on it are very interesting." Constantine quickly took out a magnifying glass enchanted with a spell and carefully peeked at the outer defense of the eye of Agamotto. In the magic magnifying glass, countless complicated runic chains revolved around a green light that was emitting powerful energy. They used the energy of the light to forge a weapon using a magic circle. At the same time, they used the power of the powerful energy source to bind and protect the energy source itself. Constantine could only see the outer shell of the divine artifact. Its core was hidden very well, and it was hastily protected. This thing requires a specific magic system to use. The magic system it uses is different from what I've learned. It's very difficult for me to help you learn how to use it." Constantine looked up. He was a little confused. "Didn't the magician who gave it to you leave behind an inheritance?" The little spider scratched its head and said awkwardly, "He left Magician Wang to help me, but I was separated from him." Constantine thought for a long time and carefully said, "So, you came from another magic world. I know a magician from the Maya world. He's the greatest hero in the history of the Maya world, a descendant of the master of the Dark Knight who was stranded on Earth. When he came of age, he was accidentally teleported to the Maya world and inherited the divine artifact of the master of the Dark Knight's family, the Night Blade. Are you in the same situation as him?" The little spider nodded. "Almost." "Huh. Is the Maya world related to Middle-earth? Is there a Maya in the Maya world?" Constantine looked at it helplessly. "It's just a coincidence. Besides, Mira and Mayor are two different words. So, you don't know how to use this divine artifact?" Constantine said, "And you know nothing about magic?" The little spider nodded dumbly. Constantine was silent for a while. He pointed at the little spider and said, "Then bring it to me and let me have a look." The little spider said, "Oh," and placed the eye of Agamotto on the table so that Constantine could take a closer look. However, Constantine suddenly looked behind the little spider with a terrified expression and screamed, "How did you get in here? Who are you?" The little spider sensed that there was nothing behind him, but he still looked back because of Constantine's sincere expression. The next moment, when he turned around again, he had already been teleported to the streets of London. Facing the gloomy skies of London and the stench of urine wafting into his nostrils, the little spider stared blankly at his empty left hand. "Who am I?" Chapter 1180. "Ah!" A demon with the horns of a goat and burning with dark red ashes hugged his arms and screamed. He held the eye of Agamotto in his hand. The bronze pendant turned dark red in the demon's hand, burning his body and soul. "Let go of it, John." "That won't do. If you let go of it, it will instantly return to its owner's hand. In fact, if it wasn't for the fact that its owner doesn't know any magic at all, he would only need to chant an incantation to deprive you of your soul as fuel and send the thing back to his own hand. According to the contract, you have to help me keep it safe. Your soul stinks. Even the most despicable demon in hell is more sincere than you, and even the most stinky maggot is cleaner than your soul. You scoundrel who would even deceive a demon." The demon screamed. Constantine put his leg on the table and lit another cigarette. "Thank you for your compliment, but you're just a goat infested with maggots, with an anus on your face. It took me so much effort to trick this treasure, and I'm letting you keep it safe. Isn't that in line with the contract? According to the contract, you can obtain all my wealth, including my soul." "Wait a minute, but when the contract is fulfilled, I'll go to hell." "How certain are you that I'll go to hell? If you want to fulfill the contract, you'll have to snatch my soul from the hands of a dozen demons. There are many demon kings in hell among them. Besides, I think I'll go to heaven." "Heaven?" The demon laughed and even choked. It's impossible. Even Satan can go to heaven. You can't. We'd rather let you live forever than let you go to heaven. You owe us too much. When you go to hell, we'll consider ourselves kind if we can turn you into ashes. Look, to help you ignore the pain of your soul burning, I even talked to you to distract you." Constantine sighed. "You're in charge of holding this thing. I'll go and see if there's a way to dispel the protection spell." Just as he was about to set off to find his friends, the door to his magic room was kicked open. Constantine turned around in shock. Not many people could find his secret chamber. Those who could find it were either very powerful magi or his trusted friends. It would be fine if it was a friend, but if it was one of the strongest magi, he would have to start thinking about what he was going to say next. "Zatanna!" Constantine exclaimed. "It was a friend. You're hiding like a bug again." Zatanna spoke rudely. "Croydon's pointer should still be with you. Lend it to me for a while." Croydon's pointer, a famous magical artifact in the world of magic, or rather, one of the cheats. That item had once attracted the attention of a famous mage association in the world of magic, the Church of Cold Flames. Constantine had been tossed around quite a bit during that fight. It was a legendary magical tool that was said to have been created by a dark mage called Angus Croydon. He was a famous sadist and had a penchant for cannibalism. This pointer could help him find any source of magic to satisfy his greedy desires, and he would offer his blood to it. This item was famous and very useful. With it, it could help you find anything, as long as it was related to magic. "You're mistaken. That thing isn't here." "Aya." Constantine clutched his stomach, his face covered in cold sweat as he slid down from the chair. Zatanna retracted her fist. "Don't tell me it's missing. If a bastard like you doesn't find this thing immediately, I believe that the world will be at peace." "It's in my shirt pocket." Constantine endured the cold sweat as he said, "In the cigarette box." Zatanna used 2 fingers to reach into Constantine's shirt pocket, then nimbly fished out the dial inside. It was a small compass made up of 3 parts, a pointer, and a lens. It was similar to the one in Captain Jack Sparrow's hand. "What are you looking for?" Constantine complained. "You're becoming less and less gentle towards me." "Zatanna!" "Yes, ever since I discovered that you're scum." Zatanna said bluntly. "Some time ago, a very powerful energy fluctuation came from Metropolis. It was the power of an incredible source of magic. Don't tell me you don't know about it. Many mages ran over to investigate, and I have a good relationship with the Righteous Alliance, so I know more. We found the remnants of the power of time in Metropolis, and we found the projection of time left behind. The Ghost and Mr. E worked together to restore the scene. The time in Metropolis had been reversed. It wasn't a small matter like one or two people going back in time, but a powerful force that reversed the time of an entire city. Mr. E believes that the source of magic can restore everything. The Righteous Alliance. All right, Batman still doesn't trust me, but I learned something from Barry. A mage from another world used a powerful artifact to reverse time and destroy a monster created by the Second Prophet. At the same time, he reversed the damage it had caused to Metropolis. This is a miracle in magic. No one can pay such a high price. I divined. It can reunite me with my father again, and perhaps even reverse the tragedy. When Constantine heard this, he knew that he could no longer stop Zatanna's ambition to find the artifact. However, he vaguely felt that something was wrong. He probed. Does that mage from another world have any objections? You want to snatch his things? I just want to borrow it, Zatanna said guiltily, and I will remind him that there are people preparing to plot against him. The Fallen Witch, the Church of Cold Flames, and even the people of Shadow Pact want to interfere. There's also the Pentagram, the people of the Church, and Heaven and Hell. There are rumors that the person who obtains this artifact will become the fourth prophet. Prophet? Constantine fell silent. The smoke in front of him blurred his expression. Those monsters. You should know how terrifying and powerful the prophet is. We are not the uniformed people of the Righteous Alliance who know nothing about the mysterious world. What's the name of that mage from another world? Constantine asked. Maybe we can make friends with him. He's called the Supreme Mage. Zatanna stared at the dial and prepared to cast a spell while casually replying to Constantine. Cold sweat immediately dripped down Constantine's forehead. The needle on the compass in Zatanna's hand began to turn slowly after casting the spell. Then it pointed to a position behind Constantine. The magic showed that the thing was there. Zatanna calmly raised her head. What a good act. John, so fast. Chapter 1181. The little spider walked through London. The boy walked alone on the streets of London. This was simply saying to the thugs with knives everywhere in the streets, I am easy to bully. But the little spider was not easy to bully. The biggest hobby of the good neighbors in New York City was to tie up thugs with spider silk. Before Peter had acquired superpowers, he was a stupid young man in Queens. What he lacked the most in his life was this kind of third-rate thug. In the early days of acquiring superpowers, the little spider always roamed the streets and alleys, stopping some violent incidents such as knife robberies and gun robberies of convenience stores. Compared to a hero like Stark, the little spider lacked the face-to-face with evil big entrepreneurs, new or old capitalists, evil organizations such as Hydra, and high-class criminals, such as the agents of various countries. Most of the time before he joined the Holy Shield and the Avengers, he dealt with some down-and-out scientists, gangsters, criminals, and violent organizations. In general, the reality of the people at the bottom was very closely integrated and lacked the grandeur of a big scene. London is still okay. When the little spider finished tying up the sixth thug who tried to rob him with a knife, he was not surprised to find the prophet leaning against the entrance of the alley, leaning against the wall with her head tilted. Her burgundy hair blocked half of her face. She said, although Great Britain has colonized the world for 500 years, but in its heyday, they never let the low-quality people of the colonies enter London. So you don't see Indian turban servants here, Arabs and black people, and gypsies who live in motorhomes and talk like they have a kibbeh in their mouths. There are only Indian doctors and university professors, rich Arabs. If we were in France, say, Paris, these people would be wandering the streets from the Champs-Élysées to the Bastille, creating the smell of Paris at the same time, the stench of human urine. The French perfume back then was to cover up these things, and it's the same today. I have to say, although London now has a mayor of the Church of Truth, the old British colonists have not lost their style after all. At least they know to refuse immigrants. You should remind me what kind of scum the person I'm going to meet today is. The little spider complained. I've reminded you. You must choose him. I've said that I know many master magicians who are far better than him. The prophet came before the terrified London local gangster who was trapped on the wall by the spider silk and looked at him seriously. He is really lucky. Originally, he would have been sent to the prison for felons in 3 years because he caused a serious injury during a robbery. Now it seems that it won't happen. The little spider said happily, "Is that so? That's why I'm doing this." He raised his left hand, which was wearing a crimson glove. The mechanical glove looked very cool. At least, that's what the hooligans thought. They kept trying to get their hands on it, and now it was hanging on the walls and roofs. On the other hand, the prophet pulled the topic back. "I think you need to be separated from that thing for a while. When it is on you, it makes your fate look blurry. You can only see it more clearly when it is away from me. Now it seems the destruction of the world you caused has nothing to do with that thing." The prophet looked at the little spider seriously. "Moreover, that thing is now a problem." The prophet tilted his head. "You used it to cause too much trouble in the metropolis and attracted a lot of people's attention. Now it is a temptation that attracts people's attention. To be honest, those who study magic, none of them have not messed up their own lives, but they are more superstitious about cheating in magic. They think the prophet is very powerful. In fact, they have caused too much trouble themselves. You only need to borrow a little bit of the price caused by their abuse of magic. With a clever lever, you can lift up their lives and smash them into pieces. We can easily control their desires, because no one who studies magic is wise enough to be pure of heart and few desires. This kind of person will not study magic at all. Magic is desire and ambition. These people are so pitiful. They ruin their lives, hurt their loved ones, and at the same time, they are superstitious about cheating. Do you know what this means?" The prophet asked. "They may have a lot of things they regret." The little spider seemed to understand. More than a little. They have countless mistakes that they want to make up for. Things that make their hearts, livers, spleens, and lungs ache the moment they think about it. Now that they know there's a cheat called medicine for regret. Do you think they'll go crazy?" The prophet smiled maliciously. "Some people think they have cheated a treasure, but in fact it is a bomb." Madame Xanadu was the world's strongest divination witch. The blood of the ancient people gave her the ability to predict the future. In the magic world, it was rumored that Madame Xanadu was once one of the candidates for the prophet. Some people said that except for her identity as a prophet, her prophetic ability was not inferior to the prophet, but only Madame Xanadu herself knew that prophets were monsters. The first prophet was omniscient and omnipotent, the second prophet chose for the world, and the third prophet loaded the file and restarted. These 3 monsters were the real peak of the mysterious world. They guarded an ultimate secret, the secret about the world's destruction. An organization was built around the 3 of them, and the World Security Council was their pawn. Why did Madame Xanadu know so clearly? Of course, it was because she was also one of them. She was a member of the World Security Council, although she did not remember anything after leaving the headquarters. "You have to think clearly, Muen. This is not something you can touch." Madame Xanadu warned the blonde in front of her. "That thing is very dangerous, more dangerous than you can imagine. Let her come out and talk to you." Muen's attitude was very firm. Which? Muen's right hand that was placed on the table suddenly stretched out a slender and strange palm with black nails. Their fingers intertwined, and then Muen gently flipped her palm. Her whole appearance changed. She became a black-haired, green-eyed witch, the same as Madame Xanadu in front of her. "Help me. You owe me." The witch tilted her head and said in a half-pleading, half-threatening manner. Madame Xanadu sighed. She was not going to tell the witch, but when she was divining just now, she seemed to find that things had changed. That thing fell into the hands of a person who was completely unexpected by Madame Xanadu. This seemed to be specially used to take the blame, so Madame Xanadu changed her mind. since the prophet had decided that this person would take the blame. Then what are you still hesitating for? Why aren't you pushing the blame away? The thing you want is now in Constantine's hands. Madame Xanadu slowly took out the dried corpse of a red-breasted robin from beside her that had stopped on a withered rose branch. She lowered her head and kissed the head of the red-breasted robin. The red-breasted robin came alive in a breath and flew up and down the back of Madame Xanadu's hand. Madame Xanadu handed the red-breasted robin to the witch and let it fly up to the witch's shoulder. Chapter 1182. I have a bad feeling about this. Constantine paced back and forth in the secret magic room and said uneasily, I think I've been tricked, hey? Don't make yourself sound like an innocent victim. That child didn't give this to you voluntarily. Zatanna was only wearing a sports singlet as she floated in the air with her legs crossed. A glowing crystal ball hovered in front of her. Her back was facing Constantine, and she did not even turn her head as she sneered. I did trick him into giving me the item, but he was definitely lured here on purpose. That person knew that I couldn't resist the temptation. He used my weakness. What weakness did he use? Zatanna said disdainfully, Is he despicable and shameless? Crystal water, reveal yourself. The magic incantation that Zatanna was used to was a type of reverse magic. In short, it was to reverse the pronunciation of words. Many people thought that this was very evil. Some devout Christians still believed that the blasphemous incantation of the devil was to reverse the words of the Bible, and that the priest could exorcise the devil by reciting it correctly. God Qin scoffed at this strange belief of believers. When Qinong was a grand arcanist, he had also studied arcane theory, the science of the magic world. He summarized and understood the rules. Arcane magic was just an objective understanding of the magic world. He always felt that this kind of magic that used someone's classics in reverse or chaotic and without any rules was actually a kind of divine art. It was just like the act of inputting instructions into a computer. The rules of the magic world were like a person inputting Chinese characters into a computer and then realizing all kinds of magical functions, thinking that Chinese characters had magic power. In the end, it was still the rules of the world itself that worked. The so-called reverse words, the so-called prayers, the so-called symbols of magic were all the result of someone mastering the fundamental rules of the world, mastering arcane magic and science. Then they used these rules, compiled them into programs, and provided them to those idiots to use. Why did Qinong believe in this so firmly? The second prophet looked at the superbrain that was said to have been created by the prophet and could replace them. He looked at the runes that kept flashing across it. Registration ID Zatanna has requested access again. Let me see what request she has made this time. Oh, so it's foresight. Zero prophet. Give her 80% of the future she wants to know. Every day, the Zeroth prophet of the three prophet system, a brain that gathered the abilities of the three prophets, handled the requests of thousands of sorcerers through the program that the three prophets created to manage the world. Under normal circumstances, they would approve the requests, and the Zeroth prophet would arrange for the sorcerers to pay the price. This was their destiny. The three prophet system would arrange all the mages clearly. Far away in London, the third prophet intercepted part of the request, added something to the reply Zatanna had received, and resumed sending. Zatanna only felt that today's prophecy was slightly delayed before she saw the scene of the future appear on the crystal ball. Blurry and unclear scenes were displayed in front of her. She saw a spider weaving a web in the darkness, saw the web enveloping the entire world, and saw all the heroes struggling in the web. But the spider itself was also trapped in the web. She saw a war that tore apart the entire world. She saw three indistinct shadows standing under the endless light. Zatanna woke up with a start. Constantine took out a cigarette and held it in his hand without lighting it. He looked at Zatanna, who had woken up from cogitation with a horrified expression, and said, It looks like you're doing a deep divination. Is this matter that troublesome? Zatanna put on her clothes and said fiercely, It's much more troublesome than you think. I saw a war that could tear the entire world apart, and there are 3 people standing on it. I think they're prophets. For that thing of yours, blood will flow like a river. I want to advise you to throw that thing away now. Impossible. Constantine lit his cigarette. That thing is like a rope. If you hold it on the shore, you'll be pulled into a whirlpool. And if you throw it away in the whirlpool, it will be equivalent to giving up the last life-saving straw. Little Na, I'm familiar with this situation. Now that we're deep in it, it's our biggest bargaining chip. After the gamble begins, we can't give up on any bargaining chip, even if it's a high-interest loan from the devil. Constantine put on the yellow windbreaker and turned to Zatanna. Now, we have to use this bargaining chip to strengthen our strength. We need strength now, even if we have to make a deal with the devil. At the very least, we have to break the protective spell on that divine artifact. Zatanna had not given up on the idea of reversing time and finding her father. She bit her lip and said, "The mage who casts the protective spell is too powerful. Perhaps only the spectre can break that spell." The spectre was the most powerful, vengeful spirit created by God. Zatanna did not know why it came to the human world. It was said that a few of its companions had fallen. Thus, the spectre descended to represent God to punish them. There's no need. Constantine's train of thought was different from ordinary people. Most of the protective spell's power is still used to bind the magic source. It's not easy for us to pry it open, but if we change our train of thought, it won't be difficult to smash it open. Break the protective spell and release the magic source? Zatanna was shocked. Are you crazy? We all know how powerful and troublesome that magic source is. It's a miracle to be able to bind it and use it stably. To a mage, the value of the protective spell is even higher than the magic source. You actually want to break it. The released magic source will go berserk and will no longer be able to restore the function of the divine artifact. If we need it as a weapon, then a powerful magic source that cannot be controlled is better than a useless piece of trash. Constantine said solemnly. Of course, it's not to that extent yet. Although Constantine said this, he looked at the eye of Agamotto as if he was looking at an incomparably hard walnut. He was thinking about where to break it open. Zatanna took the divine artifact that the 2 of them had worked together to seal with one hand. She glared at him angrily and said, "Don't even think about doing that. I'd rather hand over a treasure like that. I'll take care of it first." "Who are you going to trick now?" Zatanna said sarcastically. "Let me think. Constantine has 3 treasures: lies, magic, and friendship. You seem to have 1 less friend now. Let me count. You don't seem to have anyone to trick anymore." Constantine's face twitched. It was clear that Zatanna had poked at his wound again. It had to be said that although Constantine put in a lot of effort to trick his friends, he treated every single one of his friends sincerely. When necessary, he would even die for them. However, he knew how to sacrifice too well, whether it was himself or his friends. Every time he lost a friend, he would feel really sad and guilty. It was precisely because of this that he was able to make a few sincere friends, even though he was notorious for tricking his friends. However, there really weren't many left. The rate at which his friends were producing and consuming magic source was not proportional. There really wasn't enough left. This time we're going to meet the so-called most despicable, bloodthirsty, and terrifying person in all of Manhattan. However, he's actually just a third-rate voodoo warlock leading a group of brutal street thugs. He's a smart person. He should have already sensed something. I'll see if I can get something good out of his hands. This is the price I have to pay for warning him that trouble is coming. Every time trouble comes knocking on his door, I'll take the initiative to lead him away. I'm really a good person. To him, I'm really a good person. Zatanna understood. Daddy Midnight, I remember he's still looking for you. You seem to have stolen something from him again. Constantine touched his pocket. Did you bring the reversal charm? Give me one first. It's time to pay some price. The third prophet watched the two of them embark on their journey. Her nose twitched fiercely. Her delicate nose flapped, giving her a vicious feeling. She curled her lips in disdain. Oh, sour smell. Then she smashed Constantine's price onto his sexual orientation. Chapter 1183. Constantine stood in front of an apartment building. This was where Old Midnight ran his gang. As soon as Constantine got out of the taxi, he saw a few Midnight Sons. They were the gangsters, led by their father. They stood guard downstairs and hid in a corner to monitor the crowd. When they saw Constantine, they were so shocked that they dropped the cigarette in their mouths. One of them quickly disappeared and went upstairs to report to their father. Constantine calmly observed the disappearing gangster from the corner of his eyes. He calmly asked Zatanna, who was in the car, "Aren't you going up?" "I'm not going up. I'll wait for you here." Zatanna didn't like the African voodoo warlock. "I've already put the reversal charm in your pocket. I hope he can calm down a little. What did you steal from him this time?" Zatanna asked. "It's so embarrassing to stand with you. Don't say that." "Little Zach, it's just a skull detector," Constantine said calmly. "I thought I cleared up the misunderstanding with him. That day, there was a huge energy fluctuation in the capital. I was a little curious, so I discussed borrowing that thing from old Dad. I didn't see him when I went there, so I didn't tell him. But you didn't expect that thing to come to your door, right?" Zatanna sneered. "Go up. Accept the punishment you deserve." Constantine smiled mischievously. "Little Zach, we're best at avoiding punishment and paying the price. This is magic." At that moment, Constantine saw from the corner of his eye a half-naked black man walking down with a group of people. He wore a large gold chain. Daddy Midnight was a voodoo warlock from Haiti, and he had many capable black men under him. Constantine walked towards him with a smile on his face and said, "Hey, my friend, it's been a long time. Is old Dad well?" The black man went up and punched Constantine, knocking him to the ground. "You stole old Dad's thing again. How dare you come again?" Constantine fell to the ground and cried out in pain. Constantine raised his head. "Aren't I here now? I'm showing my sincerity, and I'm also helping my dad solve a problem. You should know what's going to happen in the capital that day. Everyone knows about the magic wave from the skulls. Someone will definitely come looking for it. Ugh." Constantine was hit again by Blackie's crowbar. Oh well. Sable only stopped when Constantine collapsed to the ground. "Dad wants to see you. Think about how you're going to explain yourself." It had turned into a hideous and terrifying resurrected corpse. Daddy Midnight stood to the side with his arms crossed and a cigar in his mouth. He looked at Constantine, who was wearing a voodoo sect robe, and sneered. "I'm curious. What are you looking for?" "Constantine, you stole something from me, and you're going to look for the magical artifact that appeared in the capital. This isn't your style. Normally, you would restrain your greed. You know the price of magic. Although I hate to say it, Constantine, you're a scum, but you're also a scum with a standpoint. You maintain the balance of magic," Daddy Midnight said. "That's why I'm willing to listen to your story after seeing a pile of rotten flesh like you. Of course, don't play tricks on me." Daddy Midnight reached out and took out a strange charm from Constantine's shirt pocket. "Reverse charm. Return the damage you've suffered to the last person who hurt you today." Daddy Midnight pressed Constantine against the half-dead resurrected corpse's face, giving him intimate contact with it. Jia Kong was so disgusted by the stench of the rotten corpse that he wanted to vomit. When the corpse's teeth bit into him, he screamed, "If you do this, Xiao Zhao won't kiss me for half a year." Daddy Midnight flipped the charm, and it suddenly burst into flames, transferring all the damage Constantine had suffered to the resurrected corpse. Father Midnight loosened his grip on Constantine's neck, allowing him to stand up calmly. Jia Kong tidied up his coat and shirt, spitting out a mouthful of rancid saliva in disgust. He snapped his fingers, and the space around him fell into darkness. Only Jacques and Midnight were in the dark. "I received an order from that lord," Jacques said. "Don't try to be mysterious." "John, I'm not a very patient person," Daddy Midnight said. Twisted blue flames suddenly appeared around Constantine, and a blurry figure appeared in the middle of the flames. He looked at Constantine and said, "I need you to do something for me, John." Daddy Midnight was shocked. "A prophet!" "The first prophet." Constantine turned sideways to face the projection that had been preserved by magic. His silhouette had a cigarette in its mouth, which was also a medium for casting spells. In fact, the history of the use of tobacco in occultism was almost the same as the history of tobacco being used by humans. The Native American shamans loved to smoke tobacco to cast spells, using it as a medium for casting spells. A certain wizard, a white-robed wizard who read himself as a berserker, also loved tobacco. The projection was surrounded by smoke. Obviously, Jacques had used tobacco as a medium to make it appear. The distorted projection of the first prophet said, "In the future, a divine artifact will appear in the metropolis." A blurry figure, glowing with green light, appeared in the smoke. Constantine said slowly, "It's like kryptonite, right? It's very dangerous. It's a door that connects to another world. It can create the fourth prophet. It's a key sent by someone. Help me find it, Constantine. It's a beacon for a powerful wizard to return home. But we can't let him return, because he'll destroy this world. There are 3 outsiders who came to our world. Reed, the spider, and strange blurry figures appeared in the projection. Protect him." The first prophet looked at Reed's projection with a complicated expression. Then he said to the spider's projection, "And the divine artifact is with him. He can destroy the world, but this world should have been destroyed long ago. Don't worry about it. He's the one we've chosen to destroy this world. And him." The first prophet pointed at Strange. "He's a wizard who's been exiled from time. You must bring him back at the right time. If the time isn't right, the world's destruction will go out of control." Constantine's figure appeared in the projection for the first time. He asked the first prophet, "Isn't it the committee's responsibility to protect this world?" "Why me?" "Because our opinions have diverged. The 3 prophets have split. We all see that the world is at a critical juncture, standing at the crossroads leading to different futures, but our opinions have diverged greatly. Everyone wants to save this world, but it can't be saved anymore. We must make a choice, a different choice. So we each do what we want. The committee will only act when the 3 prophets agree. This is the iron rule I've set. The committee is doing their best to save me, but I must ensure that there's a chance to start over. So we can only let the second and third prophets do what they want. And when it comes to making a choice for the world, no one can compare to the second prophet." Constantine said solemnly, "That's really an ability that makes people jealous." "We don't agree, so I need you to get the divine artifact. That way, I might be able to stop him from making a choice for the world at the critical moment. But he can make it so that I can't even touch the divine artifact," Constantine said. "No, he will." The first prophet smiled. "As long as you're unlucky, he'll deliver to you. This is the rule of the game between us." The illusion disappeared. Father Midnight was silent. Chapter 1184. Looking down at the blue planet in space, Chin-Ong stood by a window in the committee's headquarters that overlooked Earth. After looking at Earth for a while, he turned around and asked the moon to move the headquarters back to the ground. "The lock and key have been separated," Chin-Ong said to a tall figure kneeling in the shadows. "Summon the evil alliance. I have something for them to do." "Yes," the man and woman in the darkness said respectfully. In the metropolis, Constantine walked out of Daddy Midnight's territory and looked up at the night sky. It was already past dusk, and the bright moon hung high in the sky. There were mysterious patterns on the surface of the moon. Today's moon was especially big, and it was the second full moon of the month. The cold moonlight in the night sky was tinged with blue, signifying that the phenomenon of the moon's phase that occurred once every 3 years. The blue moon had arrived without warning. Constantine stared at the blue moon, recalling what a blue moon meant in magical astrology. A red moon meant that evil was active. On that day, dark species like werewolves and vampires who worshipped the moon would welcome an abundance of magic. It was also the day of some of their important customs. The blue moon signified the activity of magic. On this day, all the magic sources in the world would be abnormally active. Many magic curses could be cast using the power of the blue moon. Mages could also take advantage of this rare phenomenon and use some magic rituals to increase their magic power, using magic to absorb mana from the blue moon. However, the blue moon's arrival was usually foreshadowed. Any mage who knew a bit of magic could predict it in advance. It was an important part of astrology. Even the astronomical institutions on Earth could calculate the time of the blue moon's appearance after the 16th century. However, today, just like the few exceptions in history, the blue moon appeared without any warning. Constantine decided to go back and check his collection of magic tomes to see what it meant. In London, the madam of the capital also stared at the bright moon. As someone from an ancient race, she knew what it meant. Her green eyes flashed with a hint of worry. She whispered, "Summon the ancient evil again? Second prophet, what are you trying to do?" The spirit soared into the air. His entire body was wrapped in a green cloak, and extreme pain caused his face to contort. He could not help but scream into the sky. Green lightning and sparks shot out from his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth, burning his soul. The nature of the spirit of vengeance caused him great pain, and his power was torturing him. Spectres were the vengeful spirits of the supreme God. They possessed almost omnipotent divine powers. It used to be the devil Astur, one of the 7 archdevils ordered by the Messiah to destroy the Tower of Babel. It was also one of the most powerful spirits of vengeance. It was the archangel of the Messiah's angel legion. After its power was taken away by Mephitos, it walked the human world and was ordered to judge all evil. He and Johnny Blaze's spirit of vengeance, Zarathanos, were one of the 7 great devils of hell. However, the spirit did not understand why it, as the wrath of God, as the angel of the spirit of vengeance, had to take orders from a human. Therefore, it often resisted, but was tortured by the nature of its own power. The spirit, finally, could not bear the extreme pain. It turned into a green lightning and rushed into the sky, heading for the moon. It turned into a lightning bolt and galloped in space, passing the outer space of the earth at the speed of light, and landed on the back of the moon in a secret temple. In the main hall of the temple, the spirit turned into a human. It was still wrapped in a green cloak, and its expression was like a mask. The spirit slowly stood up. It did not even look at the figures beside it. It just stared at the figure on the altar of the temple, Chenong. There were a total of 6 people standing side by side with him. The 7 of them were the ancient evil force controlled by Chenong, the evil alliance. Among them, there was no lack of acquaintances of the little spider. Chenong calmly looked at these random minions and slowly said, "My plan has reached a critical point, so each of you has a mission. Now, the first mission for you is to start a war between good and evil. Destroy the alliance of justice and order. Do not let them have the time to stop my plan." "Plan?" The spirit's eyes flickered. "What plan?" Chenong reached out and pointed, and the spirit's body burned with green flames again. The flames of the spirit of vengeance burned his soul, and the spirit's screams echoed through the hall. He trembled all over, and green flames spewed out of his 7 orifices. Lightning burst out of his eyes. The spirit of vengeance turned into flames and lightning, surrounding him and torturing him. The other 6 people in the shadows avoided the lightning that shot out of his body and stood to the side, watching coldly. Chun-Ong slowly said, "This is not something you can ask, Spirit. I know you always want to defy me, and you are very confused about why I can order you. You think I have stolen the authority of God. You think you are God's subordinate. You think you are different from the other 6 great devils because you have confessed to God. You think you are loyal to Christ. But God doesn't care about confession, and the Messiah is not the Christ you think. You think that God ordered you to destroy the world because humans tried to blaspheme the authority of God. You think that the Messiah ordered you 7 spirits of vengeance to destroy the Tower of Babel and build hell to judge humans. So you think that judging evil is your mission. You think I am a prophet. You think I am Aaron, the prophet recorded in the book of Exodus, Abel, Gospel of Luke, Abraham, Genesis, Agabus, Anna, Gospel of Luke, Azariah, 2 Chronicles, Barnabas, Acts, Deborah, Judges, Elijah, 1 Kings, Enoch, Jude, Ezekiel, Isaiah, Moses, Deuteronomy, Paul, Acts, and my matey, Mecca. But I am above all Asdar." Chun-Ong did not continue. He turned around with his back facing the 7 people and ordered, "Go! Each of you choose an opponent. Do not disappoint me." Chun-Ang's tone was light, but more than one person in the dark was shivering. They bowed to Chun-Ong and left to find their own opponents. After a long time, a voice suddenly appeared. "Lord Prophet, is the plan really at a crucial stage?" Someone snuck back and asked Chun-Ong. Chun-Ong smiled faintly. "My plan has already succeeded. It was completed before the formation of the committee. To stop it, it was only possible during the last destruction of the world, but they failed. So there is no more chance. You should have guessed it already. Fu Manzhou." At the bottom of the steps, Fu Manzhou, who once appeared in Gotham City and called himself the Khan, bowed respectfully to Chun-Ong. "Yes, Lord Prophet, I have guessed some secrets. The trend has been set, and Peter Parker and the Eye of Agamotto are just the straw that broke the camel's back. Do you just ignore them, whether they will be used by those people? You are still playing your little tricks." Chun-Ang's face was expressionless. "Fu Manzhou, during the last destruction of the world, you were lucky to escape by relying on me. You must be wondering why the Holy Shield is on my side, why Stark wants to kill Rogers, why the Civil War of Heroes, why the One-Eyed Nick recreated the World Security Council for me, why during the apocalypse the heroes turned against each other, why after my identity was revealed, most of the heroes still chose to stand on my side, why Ms. Marvel, who was regarded as the last trump card by Nick Fury, did not play any role. Fu Manzhou, knowing too much can easily lead to death." Chun-Ong said lightly, "The members of the committee have disappeared one by one. Don't you understand? You can live until this universe. Peter can live, and Strange can stay safely outside of time. Isn't it all because of limited knowledge? Don't reveal the secret, or I will have to make you disappear with the secret," Chun-Ong said coldly. Chapter 1185. On the dark side of the moon, in a vast underground base, or maybe the base itself was the moon, but it was almost hollowed out and transformed into a powerful weapon. When necessary, it could use the first prophet's power to cover the entire Earth and change the timeline. This was the moon base, the headquarters of the World Security Council. Batman entered the most secure place in the base, the Ultimate Archive. The Archive's keeper, a powerful artificial intelligence, Zero Prophet, had been temporarily paralyzed. Batman used the virus given by the third prophet, and when Batman returned to the Justice League, he found that there was an extra piece of information in the silk bag that the prophet had given him about the Joker. It was about the location of the World Security Council headquarters and a mysterious map. Batman could not ask anyone for help. The prophet had told him in the brocade pouch that only one person could sneak into the World Security Council headquarters and obtain the opportunity to access the ultimate file. Only then could he take the opportunity to infect Zero Prophet with the virus and temporarily paralyzed the archive's defense. Zero Prophet was the archive's secret keeper. Only the three prophets who created Zero Prophet could find the logical flaw in Zero Prophet and create a virus that could temporarily paralyze it. The third prophet asked Batman to find the Zero file, the deepest secret of the three prophet system, including something that every member of the Security Council would automatically forget when they left the headquarters. The secret of the world's last destruction was inside. Batman had no resistance to secrets. He did as the third prophet said and sneaked into the ultimate archive. Batman opened the sealed Minority Report and read it in the dark with the cold light on his wrist. The third prophet, who was beside the little spider, suddenly opened his eyes and smiled. Chunong, who was sitting in the headquarters, also smiled. He whispered a warning signal to the Evil League. Batman has sneaked into the Ultimate Archive and read the Minority Report. In the deepest part of the World Security Council headquarters, the first prophet, who maintained his existence with the entire moon base's information weapons, opened his eyes. His gaze was calm. As if he had expected it, the first prophet sighed. Perhaps the truth should have been revealed earlier. Second prophet, what are you trying to do? Minority Report. Dark Side Minority Report, Triad Demon Minority Report, Brainiac Minority Report, Watcher, Anti-Watcher Minority Report, Eclipse Mephitos Minority Report, Nine Lanterns Minority Report, Barbados the Dark Dragon Minority Report, Peter Parker, Spider-Man Minority Report, Strange Doctor Strange. Batman skimmed through the Minority Reports and saw words that were filled with blood and cruelty. Obliterate Seal, Execute, Sleep, Forget, Fix. At the top of the report, a line of cold words said, We protect this world, we maintain order, we keep secrets. Create, maintain, shelter. This. Looking at everything recorded in the Minority Report, Batman shuddered. The truth could turn the world upside down. After reading all the Minority Report in a hurry, he put the report in the safest place in his arms, in a safety device on his lower abdomen of the Batsuit. Batman hurriedly escaped from the Ultimate Archive. He wanted to reveal these secrets to the public. However, as soon as he left the archive, he saw a tall figure blocking his way. The moon base was a huge steel base. There were alloy walls everywhere, just like the interior of a huge spaceship. The Ultimate Archive was a huge, pyramid-shaped building made of an unknown golden metal. Batman had tested it and found it to be almost indestructible. He came out from the exit at the top of the pyramid and prepared to leave along the steps of the pyramid. However, there was already someone waiting in the middle of the pyramid. Only the three prophets and a few committee members had the authority to enter the entire area where the Ultimate Archive was located, so there were very few people here. There was no need to turn on the lights. The place was shrouded in darkness, and only a few lights leaked out from the running equipment, reflecting off the metal surface of the pyramid. One of the lights hit the figure in the face. It was Fu Manzhou. I've been waiting for you here for a long time. Fu Manzhou said, It just so happens that I'm the person responsible for dealing with you, so when the second prophet saw you coming, he informed me. Dealing with me? Batman asked in a low voice. Am I also judged by the three prophets as someone who could destroy the world? It seems that there will be another Minority Report about me here soon. After reading the things recorded here, I really thought about whether or not I should just destroy this damned world. Fu Manzhou laughed. The judgment of the three prophets. The third prophet has defected, and there may be no more three prophets. You're dissatisfied with the third prophet? Yes, she was not as good as her father. She actually sympathized with someone who was destined to destroy the world. The other two prophets had hearts of stone, right? Batman said, It's hard for me to imagine what words to use to evaluate the prophets. They saved the world from destruction, but they also imprisoned the world. I saw the secret of the world's destruction. Three people with the ability to predict the future created a virtual world that accommodated everyone's consciousness. The three prophet system, Batman sneered. The third prophet told us that the three-prophet system was used to protect the world from being destroyed. It was used to predict the factors that might destroy the world, and then let their lackeys destroy these factors. But in fact, this judgment was used to eliminate the mutated programs in this virtual world, or rather, the viruses that were not under your control, right? The world was destroyed. A power known as death destroyed all humans. It caused the human spirit to collapse, and the wall of common sense collapsed. Everyone became chaotic and indescribable lunatics. Humans had no choice but to abandon the material world, and the first prophet created a universe that could accommodate everyone's spirit. This can be called great. In order to prevent the power of death from finding this subconscious ocean that accommodated everyone's consciousness, you found two other people with the ability to predict the future to form the three-prophet system, so that the power of death could not lock onto the virtual world they created, which was a secret key composed of three constantly changing and unobservable variables. The three prophets were the secret key hidden in Zion's mother's body. Through the secret key composed of three constantly changing variables, a constantly changing, unlocked-on world of consciousness was hidden in the chaotic sea of consciousness of Death Knight, used to preserve everyone's consciousness. This world was the universe where Batman was now. The little spider didn't know that he had never traveled through time. After that battle, the power of the time gem stopped his time, which was undoubtedly a conspiracy of the Holy Shield. Then the disaster of death broke out, and the wall of common sense of all new humans collapsed, and the world instantly became hell on earth. The Marvel Universe was on the verge of destruction, and the ever-expanding Death Knight almost dragged down the entire intelligent life in the universe. The only way to save the world was for the professor to pull everyone into a spiritual world, a world with consciousness. Then, three prophets with the ability to predict the future sacrificed themselves to form the three-prophet system, hiding the entire world as a set of constantly changing secret keys added to the IP address of the entire spiritual universe, so that death could not find out about this universe. This is Zion. This was the secret of the destruction of the previous world. This secret could not be known by anyone, because knowing itself would come into contact with death, because death could not be perceived, and it was the unknown death that guarded this world. Once death was known, it could lead to another disaster. However, the native residents of this spiritual universe, if one or two knew the truth, it would not attract the attention of death, because their consciousness had been cleansed and the soul gate deep in their consciousness had been opened. Their souls were completely distorted by the chaotic sea, and they were reborn through the first prophet. They were clean, they knew the truth, and there was no soul gate in their consciousness that led directly to death, and they were in the council headquarters with the most powerful prophets. They would not be locked by death. But there were two exceptions, and that was the little spider and Strange, who had not gone through the baptism of the collapse of consciousness. As long as one of them knew the truth, the soul gate hidden in their consciousness would be locked by the Death Knight, and the world would be locked by the power of death, just like Neo entered Zion. This was why the little spider was destined to destroy the world. This is the secret of the prophets. Why are they omniscient and omnipotent? Because this virtual world is under the control of these three people. They are antivirus software, checking for viruses in this world day after day. And the council is those who have been baptized by the chaotic sea of consciousness when the world was destroyed and still retain their self. You help the three prophets to kill the virus because you know the truth. The others in this world are the new students of blank minds without self. So you have to create everything, protect the world, and accommodate the uncertain factors. Batman said, but not long ago, the first prophet had a problem, and the conflict between the three prophets suddenly broke out, and the third prophet defected to help Peter Parker, who might destroy the world in the future. And the second prophet, when the first prophet's situation was unstable, obtained almost all the power. From the minority report issued by the second prophet, it can be seen that he was tired of constantly protecting the world, the dimensional order, and eliminating the unstable factors. He wanted control. The second prophet planned to completely control this virtual world, depriving everyone of their freedom, so the world would be forever stable, and there would be no more uncertain factors, and it would never be discovered by death. This idea was approved by some council members, so you started to change. Fu Manchu chuckled. He didn't know what Batman was talking about, which was why he hadn't made a move until now. But to say that Chen was trying to control the world, Fu Manchu wasn't sure. He would not believe it, even if he was beaten to death. He was a madman, a truly crazy person. Control had never been his ambition. What he hoped for was some unexpected surprises. Of course, it was a nightmare for others. So Fu Manchu laughed and said in his heart, "Keep imagining it." Batman continued, "Standing in front of the second prophet are the other two prophets. They keep each other in check. Obviously, the third prophet doesn't agree with the second prophet. She defected and secretly organized some possible opposition forces. She found me, thinking that I could expose the second prophet's plot. The only thing that troubled the second prophet was that this world could not be without any prophet. Only the three prophets together could protect this world. So, he could not destroy the other two prophets. Instead, he had to maintain their existence. This was something that the other prophets did not dare to go against. They had to protect this world first. So, after the third prophet defected, she was not too pressured by the second prophet. They wanted to maintain a situation where they fought without breaking, and then find a way to control and not kill each other. It would be best if the other party could become like the first prophet, able to maintain the world, but unable to interfere with the outside world. Now, the second and third prophets are close to this secret. Chapter 1186. According to Chen Eng's plan, the 7 members of the League of Evil would face the 7 members of the Justice League, and Fu Manchu would be responsible for dealing with Batman. He should have the easiest time because Batman was just a mortal. The most powerful mortal was still a mortal. Batman's strength was in his tactical mind. Therefore, when he had enough information, he could defeat heroes and villains that were thousands of times stronger than him. However, this was completely ineffective against the Prophet, because the Prophet's advantage in intelligence had reached a crushing level. Whatever the Prophet didn't want Bruce Wayne to know, he would never know. This was why Batman in Gotham City was still clueless when the mysterious world of magic had some understanding of the Council. In a situation where he didn't have enough information, and he was facing an opponent with overwhelming strength on a battlefield that was extremely disadvantageous to him, Chen Ong could have picked anyone to defeat Batman without enough preparation. So, why did he have to arrange for Fu Manchu to do it? That was because the person Chen Ong wanted him to defeat was the brains of the Justice League, Batman, and not the mortal Bruce Wayne of Gotham City. At least, that was what Fu Manchu thought. As a ruthless villain, the evilest Asian, Fu Manchu had his own pride. His pride did not allow him to complete a job that was like a puppet. He wanted to defeat Batman at his strongest point. He wanted to fight a real Batman, not end his life like a slaughtering machine. Fu Manchu listened to Batman talk about the information he found from the Minority Report and compared it with what he knew. He slowly understood Chen Eng's idea. This was Chen Ong demonstrating to him what he expected to defeat Batman. It was not as simple as killing a mortal, but to mislead the Justice League so that he would make the Justice League lose and Chen Eng's plan succeed. It was just like how the Joker was obsessed with breaking the Dark Knight's spirit, forcing Batman to let go of his persistence and principles and agree with the Joker. Chen Ong had also personally demonstrated that he had used intelligence to mislead and control Batman's thoughts. He had even personally appeared as a villain, using seemingly reasonable reasoning to cover up his true, crazy thoughts. Therefore, no one in the Evil Alliance knew Chen Eng's real plan. Batman was saying so much because he wanted to obtain information. Batman didn't even believe it himself. They were underestimating him too much by expecting him to sneak into a seemingly heavily guarded place and obtain some sensational information through the third prophet's arrangement. The third prophet might have misled him, and the information he received might have been misleading. To verify this, he first had to expand the information exchange. Even if it was just a small talk, he had to say so much in front of Fu Manzhou and observe his reaction. "I thought you would give me a reaction after I said so much," Batman suddenly said. "But you just stood there like it had nothing to do with you." Fu Manzhou smiled. Batman had already begun his test. It seemed that this master of torture was not only proficient in using leather whips, wax dripping, pain, and fear to force the suspect to reveal information in a small, dark room, but he was also proficient in using exquisite language and superb acting skills to obtain information in the midst of people in suits and leather shoes under the bright lights of the night. Fu Manzhou said calmly, "It's not a good thing to know too much. These things have nothing to do with me." "If it has nothing to do with you, you shouldn't have listened to me," Batman said calmly. "This is a battle between prophets." Fu Manzhou pretended that he was just a small fry. His gray hair was slightly longer than Stark's, but his beard was neatly trimmed. He knew that Batman was good at psychology. Perhaps he was doing a close-up of himself. "The fact that you're here means that you've already obtained the support of a prophet, and the Lord behind me will only be stronger than her. So, you won't take anything with you today. You'll be buried here with all the secrets. The prophets can sense everything that has happened in the world. As you said, if this world is really a virtual world created by the prophets, then they can see all the data in this world. The Ultimate Archive was originally a black box created by a prophet, but the third prophet turned you into her virus, allowing you to sense everything in the black box. Being sensed by you means being sensed by her, so you don't have to say this on purpose. When you see the Minority Report, it's no longer a secret to the prophets." Fu Manzhou said meaningfully, "You're already an abandoned pawn. A Trojan virus that enters the black box is no longer of value to the authoritative ones. The third prophet has already obtained the information, so you're not here to stop me from leaking the truth." Batman's voice was hoarse. "No, you're here to stop the information from leaking because the third prophet has some sort of tacit understanding with you. Just because she knows something doesn't mean we know it. What you really want to stop is the information from leaking into the hands of the Justice Alliance." Batman had to eliminate the interference of his own subjective thoughts, and at the same time he had to infer the truth from the limited information. At least he already knew that the third prophet could obtain the information he knew, so there was not much point in stopping the information from leaking. But the second prophet still sent people to stop him. This was not to kill to vent their anger, but an act with a purpose. Batman sorted out a series of information. Although he was still in the fog of the intelligence war, he at least guessed the enemy's next move. They had to ensure that the information was still within the scope of control that only the prophet knew. Batman did not know what tacit understanding or agreement the second prophet and the third prophet had. But it was clear that the third prophet's position was not against the second prophet, nor was she with the Justice Alliance. The third prophet's only position was herself. From this perspective, the third prophet wanted to use the Justice Alliance, but it was unclear whether this use was good or bad. But at this time, Batman made the right judgment. In the enemy's headquarters, facing an enemy sent by the second prophet to kill him, there was no way he could bring back information alive. In terms of information, only the prophet could fight against the prophet, and only those with authority could fight against those with authority. Although he had left a lot of clues before he left, these could only reveal part of the information revealed by the second prophet before this trip, including the headquarters of the World Security Committee and some of the committee's secrets. The real important information had already been intercepted. Batman thought a lot at this moment, including the information about the prophet that he could not distinguish between true and false. He found that even if he ignored the shocking assumption that the world was a virtual world created by the prophet, with just the information he knew, it was impossible for him to mislead and defeat the prophet. In the process of transmission of information, the prophet, who could foresee everything, had a million ways to play with it. Only the prophet can fight against the prophet. This cliché flashed through Batman's mind. Now, there was only one possible channel of information, the third prophet. To use the third prophet, Batman's eyes narrowed. He had to establish a channel of communication with the third prophet. The third prophet's weakness was her personal quality. As long as he could communicate with the third prophet, Batman was confident that he could influence the third prophet. His only weapon now was his brain. The third prophet knew everything and could cover all information, but her personal quality was not enough to make full use of this information. Didn't the third prophet need a master tactician like Batman? She must have thought of this. Batman thought about it from the perspective of the third prophet and realized that his value to the third prophet was actually very important. As the known number one master tactician, once Batman and the third prophet, who had unlimited intelligence ability, worked together, it would be an unbeatable combination. Why didn't the third prophet think of this? Or rather, she had thought of it, and even more deeply, she had also thought of the fatal flaw. It was impossible for the two of them to trust each other. Batman did not trust anyone, and it was impossible for him to completely stand in someone else's position. Batman could not agree with the third prophet's position, so the third prophet had to be careful not to be used when using Batman's tactical ability. The third prophet could not trust Batman at all. This state of mutual distrust made Batman useless to her. It was tasteless, but a pity to abandon him. That was why she used Batman as a sacrificial pawn to obtain information from the Minority Report. Batman had already thought of the key to breaking out of this situation. He had to create an environment where the third prophet could trust him, and then use the third prophet. This kind of environment was very difficult to create because it was too late to create trust now. With the second prophet next to him, Batman could not walk out of here alive. Even the second prophet could not do anything about it. But who said that people could not be controlled, served, and influenced when they were dead? Batman thought it through. The only Batman that the third prophet could trust was the Batman in her prophecy, the Batman in the future she saw. Batman had a bold idea. The prophet could see all the futures. In that case, could she see the present future? In that case, could her current thoughts and existence also be in the future that she saw? Was the timeline that she was in really real? Did she exist in the uncertain future she saw? Or would the words she said now change the present? Because the present was the future to the third prophet. Batman decided to give it a try, so he began to talk about an idea about Batman in the time trap. In the future the third prophet saw, there was a timeline where Batman decided to be loyal to the third prophet. Of course, the third prophet would not believe it easily, but this Batman posed no threat to the third prophet at all, because this was just a future in which the third prophet previewed Batman's loyalty. This future would always exist in the future because the third prophet did not have to let it happen in reality. So the third prophet could have a master tactician who only existed in the uncertain future to serve her. She could get Batman's service without worrying about his tricks, because this Batman only existed in her preview. This was a Batman that only existed for her. Safe, harmless. And this the Batman in the time trap. The hiring method was very simple. The third prophet only needed to tell Batman's own plan in the future she previewed. Then the Batman in the preview would understand her plan and take the initiative to cooperate to create the time trap. And all the plots of the Batman in the preview would be discovered by the prophet, and the third prophet could trust him relatively. Perfect solution to all the obstacles. After Batman said this idea, he calmly died in the hands of Fu Manchu. But in reality, the third prophet suddenly opened his eyes. For the prophet, the timeline was vague, and the way it existed was beyond anyone's imagination. Now the timeline returned to before the third prophet tricked Batman into going to the Ultimate Archive to read the Minority Report. At this time, the most critical secret recorded in the Minority Report to the prophet collapsed and became an unknown. As for what this secret was, of course, it was not what was written in the previous chapter. It was not that the prophet could not hear it, but it was something that was not written at all. Because the previous chapter was a preview of the future, the secret was still a black box, still a secret. It could not be observed in the preview. And this preview of the future would never come true again, because Batman's words before his death successfully moved the third prophet. He successfully broke the game, although he died in the preview. But he survived in reality. The third prophet would no longer calculate Batman's death. She would let Batman live and then tell Batman about the trick of being trapped in the time trap during the rehearsal. She would tell Batman about her plan and gain his trust. Then she would create a Batman trapped in the time trap to come up with a plan for her. If Batman died in reality, then the third prophet would not be able to preview the future where Batman was still alive, and the exclusive think tank would no longer exist. Batman used his own value to break the deadlock. At the same time, Fu Manchu, who had sneaked back, buried his head after asking his doubts, only to hear Chinong suddenly laugh. Chinong said to him, "You lost your first battle with Batman. You can't kill him anymore because the third prophet won't allow it. Batman's tactical ability and the third prophet's intelligence. You won't have a chance anymore. You still disappoint me." Chinong sighed. "If you still don't understand why you lost, go down." Chinong said to him, "Losing in the future. How pitiful." Fu Manchu walked out of the temple with a dumbfounded expression. He came in full of confidence, then was suddenly judged to have lost. Then he went out with a dumbfounded expression. Looking at the moon sky, Fu Manchu was full of confusion. What did I do? How did I lose? How did I lose? How do I win it back? Even if the intelligence was misguided, even if most of what he knew was false, even if he had no chance of winning the battle, even if he faced Chinong malice, Batman still used a small part of the correct intelligence he knew to break the deadlock and win in the future. The first battle between the Evil Alliance and the Justice Alliance took place in the future, and the Justice Alliance's brain completely crushed the Evil Alliance. However, Chinong was not disappointed. Instead, he smiled happily.